This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. James writes, Jack, making a very early bid for text of the week. Talking of prayers and religion, I imagine you're sending a few up for the final day of the National League North season on Saturday. You're not wrong there. Keith, we might need a little alarm if I talk about Kidderminster Harriers too much as Saturday approaches and the likelihood of us being champions grows ever nearer. I appreciate it's very niche. Yes. So just keep an eye on me for that. I don't want to bore anybody with my non-league footballing enthusiasms, albeit that we are perhaps on the precipice of history. It is 4 minutes after 10, and we are well over the precipice of history when it comes to a story that dominates an extraordinary amount of front pages. I took the liberty this morning on your behalf of consulting with a couple of even more wizened old hacks than I am, people who actually have what I'd loosely describe as good news sense. So ex-newspaper people who know a story when they see one. I am an ex-newspaper person who, I'd like to say famously, but sadly not famously, didn't know a story when he saw one. I've told you often in the past that my antennae used to twitch at all the wrong times. Many was the morning when I'd open a newspaper, a rival newspaper, to see a story, and I'd think, I knew that. I just didn't realise that was a story. It's tragic. I could laugh about it now, but at the time it was a source of quite a lot of existential angst. So I checked in with a couple this morning who do know one end of a news desk from the other, and they shared elements of my surprise at the amount of coverage that the passing of the pontiff has received. Although, as they both pointed out, it is as much an indication of how little news there is around at the moment as it is of the importance of this passing. So it would be uniformly a splash. It would be the front page, and it would be the front page on every newspaper, from the Sun to the Times. I don't think I've seen a Daily Star this morning. They sometimes manage to swim in the opposite direction from everybody else. But for every other national newspaper in this country and possibly across the sort of Christian world, if that's still a phrase you can use. Yeah, even the Daily Star's gone for it without even a joke. Well, there's half a joke. He has died aged 88 just hours after greeting Easter crowds and US Vice President J.D. Dunce. So yes, the Daily Star, to their credit, manages to get a joke out of it, but it is their front page, and even they have an 8-page pullout. The Daily Star, a newspaper best known perhaps for tracking the shelf life of the lettuce that Liz Truss was competing with when she was Prime Minister. So it is partly a reflection of how little news there is around, but it is also, of course, a reflection of what a momentous moment this is. Is that tautologous? A momentous moment? Are all moments momentous? They're not, are they? All moments are momentary, but a momentous moment sounds like it's repetitious, but it actually isn't. It's a momentous moment, a moment of moment, you might say. And it turns our attention to the question of Catholicism. The role that faith, that particular and peculiar brand of Christianity plays in, well, world history, I suppose, in the first instance, but also in modern life. Because as Julian points out from Denmark, only 8.3% of the UK is Catholic, and there are many like me with no religion at all. And yet all we have is wall-to-wall coverage of the Pope's death. He was old, he was sick, he died. What is there to discuss? Well, Julian, to be fair, mate, lots. In the way in which he represented opposition to almost all, I mean, as an individual as opposed to an institution, the way in which he represented opposition to almost all of the tidal waves of hatred and negativity that seem to be engulfing our world at the moment, he stood firm against them. He was clear in his commitment to peace, compassion, decency, in a way that it's hard to imagine any other world leader. And I think you describe him as a world leader, don't you? I suppose he's a head of state, is he? If the Vatican is a city-state. This is the sort of stuff I should know. I'll probably get excommunicated. So I disagree. And of course, the role that the Catholic Church has played throughout history, Julian, you don't need me to remind you or fill you in. I grant you, no one was expecting the Spanish Inquisition, but it did turn up and it did do quite a lot of damage. indeed many wars over the years fought at the altar of Catholicism. Henry VIII's decision to abandon the old faith so that he could marry his mistress is an integral, absolutely pivotal part of English history. So there's loads and loads to talk about. But I do accept your central point. I won't be doing it all day, every day this week, but I think we'll talk about it first. And I think what we might do is talk to Julian in Denmark and many others like him about what being Catholic means. This is not quite once in a lifetime territory, but it's not a subject that I'm going to file under hardy perennials that we can pull out of the cupboard whenever we're a bit short of stories. What does it mean to be a Catholic? It's not exactly traditional phone-in territory, is it? But I guess if there are people around who are baffled by the amount of coverage this is receiving, then it might be illuminating just to talk about what it means to be a Catholic. What does that phrase mean to you? I am a Catholic. 0345 6060 What does it actually mean? I see the Catholic Church as and remember, I'm allowed to say this. I have the scars, as it were, mental and emotional. I see it as a semi-abusive parent that I still love. I don't know what it's like to be raised in another religion. We spend a lot of time in this country talking about other religions. Most obviously, I suppose, in recent years, Islam and Judaism. But we never really talk about Catholicism. If we talk about Christianity, we're talking about, forgive the pun, the very broad church. And yet, not that long ago, in this country, on these islands, people were killing each other for being the wrong kind of Christian. Catholics were killing the other sort, and the other sort were killing the Catholics. What is the difference? What does it mean? I know the doctrinal differences, most notably transubstantiation, and then there's the ideological differences, like the ordination of women and the tricky areas when you're growing up, like abortion and contraception. But I don't know anybody really who could describe themselves as a devout Catholic who isn't a bit weird. If they buy into all of the doctrinal teachings with regard to traditional morality, they rarely seem to me to be overflowing with Christian compassion, kindness and decency. See the rise of always hand in hand with fascism, certain types of religion. And Mussolini was no exception to that rule. I was in Ireland recently, as I told you, and I was struck by a tour guide's comments regarding the decline of attendance in Catholic churches in Ireland. Very weird for someone of my age and background to have seen the stranglehold that the Catholic Church had on the population in Ireland not just loosen over the course of my 53 years on this earth, but absolutely disappear. The yoke almost that the population was in with the church absolutely dominant has gone. Largely, the tour guide suggested, and I see no reason to disagree with him, largely as a consequence of revelations of a very unbiblical nature, revelations about what priests and nuns and Christian brothers and Magdalene convents had done to young Irish people, what had been done in the realms of sexual abuse and in the realms of I don't know quite, emotional abuse, physical abuse, non-sexual abuse, all the other kinds of abuses visited upon most obviously altar boys and unmarried mothers. So I feel it is a semi-abusive parent that I still love. And that, I think, is the bit that non-Catholics may struggle to understand, the bit about still loving it. I could not really have had a more Catholic, big C education. My public school, my secondary school, was a monastery. It's not a figure of speech. It really was. The headmaster was a monk. Nick was talking to Cardinal Archbishop Vincent Nichols a moment ago. His perhaps most fated predecessor of the post-war period, Cardinal Basil Hume, was an abbot of the monastery where I was a schoolboy. I think he was a housemaster. He was certainly a senior member of the staff just before I arrived there. I had a couple of interactions with him, and the thing is, this makes me feel proud, and it shouldn't, because Basil Hume was not as active as he should have been in rooting out the sexual abuse that was endemic in the Catholic Church when I was growing up and when he was the Cardinal Archbishop. But I edited a school magazine, a very boring story, I'll tell you very quickly. I don't think I've told you this before. I edited a school magazine. It was a bit close to the bone, so they banned it. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You haven't changed. And the Cardinal intervened to help unban it. He made comments about what an invigorating read he thought it was, and the acting headmaster at the time, who had probably overreacted, was given enough cover by the Cardinal to unban it and claim that there'd been a sort of a conversation of compromise, and I'd recognised the error of my ways, and I inserted a letter into the pages of the magazine as it was sold at prize giving weekend, and explaining that I'd benefited from a nice chat. And anyway, we were all going ahead, and I wasn't going to go bankrupt because I'd already paid for the print run. So I have personal knowledge of that Cardinal, not the new one. What does it mean to you? If you were trying to explain two things to somebody today, I would want them to be these two things, okay? The first is a weird question, but here it is. What does that mean, that phrase, I am a Catholic? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What does that mean? 0345 6060 973. And the second question, I don't know that I can answer this one. And it's always a bit 50-50 when I can't answer the question myself. On a really good day, you will provide a multiplicity of brilliant answers that hadn't occurred to me. But on a bad day, the fact that I can't answer the question myself means that it isn't actually very easy to stumble into an interesting answer. But explain to somebody who is genuinely baffled, and you're not allowed the line about there's not a lot of news around. Explain to someone who is baffled why this is a moment of such epic import. Why the passing of a pope who, as Julian points out, was old and sick and died. Why it is a moment of such epic import. I want you to have a crack at answering that if you can. But either alongside or separately, I also want you to have a go at telling... Well, who? Telling who? Telling somebody who is sort of thinking negative thoughts about giant sky fairies, or perhaps focusing upon all the negativity that the Catholic Church has been caught up in for most of our lives, or looking at this almost. Well, there's a reason why we use the phrase quasi-religious, isn't there? But this is an almost other dimensional moment. The way it's being talked about, this human being. This ordinary mortal human being being discussed in a way that many people will never have seen before. Why? Why is this a moment of such incredible importance? 0345 6060 973. Do you think, asks Dylan, that an element of the huge coverage of the Pope's death is because he stood up for refugees and the poor, etc., at a time when politics is moving to the right? I'm not religious, but I admire him for that. I think you could be right. I mentioned that a moment ago in my defence. He did seem to be a bulwark against the direction of traffic, oddly, from an awful lot of people who claim that they represent Christian values while espousing nothing of the sort in their public and private lives. So why? Why is this apparently a moment of enormous international significance? 0345 6060 973. And on a much more personal level, what does it mean to be a Catholic? Why does it make us different, if indeed you think it does, from Protestants, from Anglicans, from Lutherans, from Jews, from Muslims, from Buddhists, from Hindus? Does it? Does it? On a good day, you think all religions essentially tilt at the same windmill, don't you? But on a bad day, you remember the times we've killed each other for relatively petty differences of opinion on things that can never be known. So what is it, the C word? What does it mean? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:19 is the time, and as if by magic, when I mentioned a moment ago people who claim to espouse Christian values but rarely do or display anything of the sort, one of Donald Trump's key consiglieri, the far-right Republican representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, has tweeted overnight that today there were major shifts in global leaderships evil is being defeated by the hand of God. So I may not be about the Pope. Who knows, with a woman who thought that forest fires in California were started by Jewish space lasers. But it's hard to imagine what else she might have been talking about. So why is this a moment of such apparent international importance? And that's the macro question, the meta question, the big picture question, and then the tiny picture question, the question that is just about you. What does that word mean to you? What does it mean to say, I am a Catholic? And I'll have a go at that. I think a semi-abusive parent that I still love probably doesn't put enough flesh on any particular bones. So I'll have a go at it after you've had a go. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. Isabel is in Hamilton. Isabel, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
First of all, love your show. You put some sanity into the world.
That's very kind.
Of right-wing overpowering media, so I just have to get that off my chest.
Well, consider it off your chest. Thank you, Isabel. Much appreciated.
So I just had compelled to call in. I'm a first-time caller, I have to say, because brought up like you, Catholic, brought up by nuns, brought up by priests, and I feel for me being a Catholic and a female Catholic that the Catholic Church has let us down big time. And number one, I don't go to chapel anymore because I don't want to be dictated by male priests. Now, I know an awful lot of them are probably very nice men, but the women in the Catholic Church have got good positions, but they're not allowed to be priests, they're not allowed to be bishops, they're not allowed to be deacons. And I hope this new Pope, whoever it is, moves forward with that and still stays in the modern world where we have to move, and also for priests to be able to marry and not be celibate, because that is absolutely nonsense.
Do you know, I had a monk, Father Charles, I think his name was, and I was sitting in a religious studies class in about 1987, and I always had my hand in the air in religious studies classes, not in many others, but I was always trying to pick holes in. And he said to me, he provided me with such a brilliant rationale for why he had taken a vow of celibacy that it stopped me in my tracks, and I've never been able to fully remember it. It was something about being so committed to God that you had no room in your life for earthly love of that nature. It was as if you were. I mean, a nun would tell you that they were married to God, and it would sound less weird, given that the Catholic Church is still, I think, opposed to same-sex marriage. It's less weird for a male priest, but there were reasons for the vow of celibacy that are not quite as bonkers as they appear to our 21st century sensibilities.
I understand that. It's the same with the nuns. You know, they are married to God. But how can you live a proper life and understand the world, understand people, if you can't live and have lovely children? I mean, God put us on this earth to have more children, to have love, and live a good life. They can still be devoted to God and live a good life and have a lovely marriage and have lovely children. Yeah,
of course you're right, and almost all other religions prove that on a daily basis. Why do you think that the story today is so enormous then?
Because I think Pope Francis did make changes, and he took women up to quite a high level in the Catholic Church. So he deserves to have that, recognition. He deserves to be loved because he loved people. He loved the poor. He was always out. He was just a genuinely lovely individual in this world where people are beginning to hate each other. We're all getting to the point where it's dog eat dog, and he wasn't like that. He was still showing there was a way forward to do it in the right way.
So what you've made me think, which I hadn't thought before, is that this is at least as much about the individual, the passing of this individual, as it is about the passing of the institution, the inhabitant of the institution. So his last big one, the Urbi and Orbi benediction, which comes as an Easter greeting, he couldn't do it himself. A senior archbishop did it for him, but he called for a ceasefire in Gaza, called for a release of the hostages. He's been pretty outspoken about what should happen in Ukraine. He's talked about anti-Semitism. He's tried to acknowledge shared humanity in areas of the world where it seems often to have been forgotten.
And in a peaceful way. I mean, a lot of Catholics, and everybody probably knows, prayers can help. Prayers can move mountains at times. And I just feel that he tried to lead the way to show us there is a different way. There's a different approach. let's all think about that and be good to each other.
Good for you. Thank you for that. And I think I allow myself a little God bless today of all days, which is something that people raised as Isabel and I were raised, say to each other, almost unthinkingly sometimes. It was how my dad always used to sign off telephone calls to me. That's how me and my mum still do. 25 minutes after 10 is the time. The personal and the political then. So I don't know whether this is something to be ashamed of or not, but I'm not sure I was fully across the esteem in which the actual Pope Franciscus, was held in many corners of the world. Perhaps that explains the scale of the coverage today. It's not about the passing of a Pope, it's about the passing of this Pope. Lauren suggests, I think we are all hoping that the next Pope continues to rally the Church against the far right. Well, it's a big ask, but I guess somebody has to. 25 minutes after 10, Peter is in Leeds. Peter, what would you like to say?
But that phrase that he used, that he would, that you were surprised at the amount of tension he's had.
Yeah.
What this Pope could do, and that was his worldly gift, was that he could communicate better than all the previous popes. And what he communicated was that human beings, the most important human being in your life at the moment is the one sitting next to you. And he said this. And when he went into prisons and when he invited people of different beliefs into the Vatican, and people said, "How can you do that?" He said, "If God was to see anybody, would he immediately condemn them or would he love them? And if God would love them, then that's what we and you must do." And I've got another quote that I'd really like this time to say this one.
Yeah, go on.
He was speaking about how people should talk to each other. And he used a Latin phrase, but I was rubbish.
You sound like Peter Cook now.
It basically meant heart to heart.
Right.
And he was talking about the simple things that people talk to about heart to heart. And he said, all these things, ordinary themselves, yet extraordinary for us, can never be recaptured by algorithms. They live on as precious memories kept deep in our hearts. The algorithms operating in the digital world and easily predictable and much more uniform than we had previously thought. They are easily predictable and capable of being manipulated. This is not the case with the heart. And that is why we need to speak heart to heart.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you, Peter. Would you...
And it's Delixit Nos, and it's his, I believe, I don't read all the encyclicals, but that was a special one. I think that was the last book that he published.
Would you have spoken about any previous popes in this manner?
I don't think I would. Well, the previous pope, I think, was extremely great theologian.
Yes.
And I did try reading one of his books, and I started reading it 10 years ago, and I'm still 3/4 of the year. It's still quarters of the way through.
It's one of those, is it?
This is what I'm trying to say. God appointed Francis at a time when we had people using catchwords like "make wherever he's talking about great again."
Yes.
What the Pope is saying is make humanity great again.
I suppose, and you'll forgive me for this.
We must always consider the person, is what the Pope has repeatedly said.
You'll forgive me for pointing this out, but he didn't exactly go out on a winning streak, did he, Peter? In the context of what we're talking about, the stuff that makes the likes of you and me despair does seem to be in the driving seat at the moment. So resistance, if not futile, was certainly not fully successful.
Right. If you are feeling despairing, who's the best example of how to cope? Our Lord, last Friday, Good Friday, nobody loved him. Apart from basically one woman who we have raised to the highest position of humanhood. That's his mum. stayed at the bottom of the...
Spoiler alert.
Stayed at the bottom of the church.
Yes.
Stayed at the bottom of the cross.
And the emotion in your voice conveys something that I understand completely, partly because of the way that I was raised. But I don't think you need to have been raised in the church to understand that. The notion of somebody dying for our sins is, I mean, incredible. It's almost too big to contemplate. And you've done an absolutely cracking job of bringing it to this programme in the same way that the Pope brought these epic but incredibly at the same time simple messages to the world. Gosh, thank you, Peter, and God bless you. I wonder why, listening to Peter, who clearly is a man of great faith, I wonder why the Pope could be so inspiring to people who have no faith. Why the last Pope, as he will be for a while, would have inspired so many people who find religion either unconvincing or quite possibly ridiculous. I think I'll throw that question open now as well, which means there are three. What does "I am a Catholic" mean in your world? 03456060973. Why is this Pope's passing receiving such extraordinary coverage and reaction? And then thirdly now, how can a man or how can somebody with no faith be inspired by somebody who is driven by faith? It doesn't make sense on one level, does it? If the motivation for his thoughts and actions, his words and his deeds is religious faith, and you find religious faith ridiculous, how come you find him inspiring? And the number remains the same. It's 10:31. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. That was a frog in my throat. I'm not getting emotional like Peter in Leeds very movingly did. I don't know if today's the day, but it plays into the question that I just asked you about the moral value of an action. And it was explained to me not long after I left very religious education that if the moral compunction driving you to do something was a fear of going to hell or a desire to go to heaven, then that was actually morally less powerful, less valuable than a simple desire to do the right thing because it was the right thing. The relationship between actions and consequences. We're all raised like that. All Catholics are raised in mortal fear of eternal damnation, which just sounds bonkers, right? It sounds like something out of dystopian fiction, the mortal fear of eternal damnation. And yet we were, whether it was priests trying to tell us about sex or whether it was nuns trying to tell us about stealing sweets. It was a very strange way to be raised. And it leaves very deep imprints on people, not all of which I think are negative. Far from it, for the record. But if I do something because I think it's best for humanity, or I believe something because I think it's best for humanity, then surely that's more valuable than doing it because I think that that's what's going to get me into heaven. I don't know. I'm just reflecting on a lot of things today. And, of course, 19th century continental philosophy was dedicated to trying to remove God from the equation of doing good. Philosophers like Hegel and Kant were all about trying to provide a rationale that did not appeal to the spiritual dimension, did not appeal to the unknowable, but provided human beings with a path towards, in the words of those great theologians, Bill S. Preston and Ted Theodore Logan, encourage humans to be excellent to each other. Simon is also in Leeds, which is also where my late father is from, and he was a very devout Catholic as well, so maybe there's something in the water up there. Simon, what would you like to say?
How you doing, James? Yeah, I think you're phoning from Shipley, your father.
Yeah, his first job was on the Shipley Times.
Yeah, just down the road from me. I'm actually in Menston near Ilkley, actually, which I don't know if you know. But, I certainly won't be talking to you in a theological way like Peter did, but sure. It's probably a little bit twisted is my response to how does it feel or what does it mean to be a Catholic. I'm not a practicing Catholic, James. In fact, I would say I'm not a practicing Catholic because I'm quite good at it now. But the thing is, I'm not really a churchgoer. Sure. I've got faith. Okay. My mother and father were strict Catholics. I was brought up as a Catholic. I think being a Catholic is how it makes you feel as a person and what you can do for other people. And I think I'm spiritual. Let's put it that way. I'm spiritual. I believe in God.
Yes.
I don't really know whether I believe in heaven or hell, and that's probably a weird thing to say from a Catholic. I'm fascinated by Catholicism in a way that, and I will say this: we do go to Mass at Ampleforth quite often.
Oh, okay.
And one story, a priest that you'll be familiar with from Ampleforth, Father Henry.
Yes.
I was talking. Both me and my wife have both been remarried.
Right.
And we went to, and as you know, as far as Catholics concerned, divorce isn't something that's looked upon in a light way.
Well, it's changed in the course of our lifetime.
It has changed. It has changed. But we've been to Ampleforth to Mass one particular Sunday morning. I got talking to Father Henry outside, and I was telling him about the situation, about me and my wife both being divorced, and we were getting remarried. And he took us both to one side, and he blessed us both as a couple. And he said, what you need to know is that God wants you to love each other. And if you love each other and you love other people and you show respect, then in one, that is what a Catholic is being all about. Now, you don't need to be a Catholic to do that, but I think the teachings of the Catholic faith and the Christian faith just gives you that little bit more incentive to try a little bit harder and try to live a good life.
That's nice. That's nice. And that fits in with the late Pope as well, in that he seems to be one of the priests who just helped people to be better.
Yeah. But one Pope that's not been mentioned, John Paul II,
yes,
who was a very, very, very popular Pope, as you full well know. And I think I'm not too sure if he hasn't been beatified. Has he been made a saint? Yeah, I'm not too sure.
I don't think so.
No. But we've had some fantastic popes that have had great effects on people, Catholic or non-Catholic, world leaders, and this is what we need, and it's not just about, as I say, it's not about Catholicism and being a Catholic. It's just about being a good person and trying your best. I'm not, we've all got our shortcomings, and I've probably got more than most. But
that's a very Catholic thing to say.
Yeah, I do try, and I don't go to church on Sundays. I don't. No. But again, you'll know yourself. Some people that go to church on Sunday, they're a Catholic on a Sunday, but what about Monday to Saturday? And you need to be doing it every day, and not everybody does.
That you put it perfectly. A lovely counterpoint as well to Peter in the way that he went very spiritual, and you've gone very secular, but with a relationship with the spiritual, the things that you get out of it as a fully functioning human being. Here's a question I never thought I'd ask, Simon, and it's only popped into my head while I've been listening to you. And I suppose looking at the esteem in which the late Pope is held.
Yeah.
But is Catholicism due a bit of a comeback, do you think?
Well, it won't do any harm, would it?
Well,
not in the world that we're living in today.
I mean, the kind of Catholicism you've just described and the kind of Catholicism that Pope Francis seems to represent, and indeed Father Henry, who, for people who don't know why Simon kept mentioning Ampleforth, is the school and the abbey that I attended, and Father Henry is still a very well-loved member of the community. That brand of Catholicism possibly could do some good in the world at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. But my father always used to say to me, and just in a few words, which meant a lot, there but for the grace of God go I. And it's a powerful saying, is that, and it's very, very true. And I think it was mentioned on Nick's show earlier about that phrase, and it's true. We try to live our best life. Sometimes we do go off the rails a little bit, and we try to get back on, and not always successfully. But at the end of the day, James, it's just about being a good person. And I think if you can achieve that, Catholic or non-Catholic, then I think there's going to be a place for you upstairs, if you know what I mean.
That's beautifully put. It really is. Thank you, Simon. God bless you. 10:42 is the time. Father Henry, who Simon refers to, I never knew. He edited the Bible. So that's quite a weird thing when you're at school to have a bloke walk past. I don't think he ever taught me. He was head of the junior school when I was there. And he edited the Bible, the New Jerusalem Bible, one of the most recent editions, the New Jerusalem Bible, and then the revised New Jerusalem Bible. If you've got that on your bookshelf or you've seen it hanging around, he edited it. What does that even mean? Did he translate it? Or did he just sort of turn it into more manageable English? Pretty crazy when you're at school. And the Bible is quite a big deal. When I did jury service not long ago, for the 10 minutes that I was actually on a jury, I swore on the Bible. I swore an oath on the Bible. And it was one of his, I think. It was incredible. Oh, look, there's Father Henry. Yeah, he edits the Bible. I told you my school was weird. Thank you, Simon. Neil is in Alton in Staffordshire. Neil, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello, Neil.
Fascinating discussion, by the way.
I hope so. Thank you.
So, very thought-provoking, which is why I've rung in. And this is a subject that I've thought long and hard about over the years. But I would describe myself as an atheist. I'm not religious. Although I was supposed to be brought up Church of England, but I never went to church. I've got very good friends who are Catholics. I've been to Catholic masses a lot, been invited to those, especially around Christmas time.
Yeah.
But I find the subject of religion endlessly fascinating.
It just is, isn't it?
Endlessly fascinating, yeah. And any movies about religion, and if I'm ever visiting cities, I always go to look at the churches and the magnificent cathedrals. So I find it all, just the whole subject.
Why? Why do you think that is?
Because it's over the centuries. And this is why I'm not religious, is because I think religion has been used to control societies very effectively. It's been used as a tool for control in the main. And there's an endless list of atrocities that the
and
church
that's why the last pope,
well.
no one can dispute a single syllable that you say. It's not confined to Catholicism, of course, but the last pope really seems to have broken out of that pattern and touched people in ways that perhaps if all popes had done, then the world would look rather different today.
And hence why I phoned, because the last two callers have said a lot of things that resonated a lot with me. Although, I'm not don't have their religious perspective, but the man himself, as a communicator, what I am inspired by is humanity and the beauty of humanity, and what a great things humanity can do when it's a force for good. Although there's a lot of bad things going on in the world right now, but he was able to communicate that, and I think he spoke to me about humanity, about the beauty of humanity. The religious aspect aside, the God thing that I just can't buy into, but the beauty of humanity. And I think what he was able to do was communicate the strength of humanity.
Yeah, without ever saying that you have to believe what I believe in order to be part of this project.
With the whole religious aspect, correct? Yeah, exactly.
I like that. I really like that. Yeah. Thank you, Neil. And I mean, you touch on the point I was trying to clumsily make a moment ago about the motivation for doing something. Probably doesn't matter, really. I mean, I suppose if you're doing something the right thing for the wrong reasons, the impact is the same as if you're doing it for the right reasons. And who are we to decide what the right reasons and the wrong reasons are? It's 10:45. It's a slightly strange phone-in if you're just joining us, as you might expect on a slightly strange day when almost all of the print media coverage today is dedicated to the passing of the late Pope, and the questions we're answering and sort of nibbling at the edges of all three most callers so far about what it means personally to be a Catholic, what the response to the late Pope's passing tells us about him in particular. I think I missed this at the outset, and about Christianity or Catholicism in general, and then the attendant questions, if you like, about why this is generating such an extraordinary response. It's 10:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where these are strange questions. They're not questions that we're going to ask every day. Gary, I reject furiously your suggestion that I've glossed over the wickedness perpetrated by members of the Catholic Church over the years. The school that the earlier caller referred to, where I went, gets its own section in Baroness J's child sex abuse inquiry. So you're not going to get any glossing over of anything from me. But today is not necessarily a conversation about the broader sweep of the Catholic Church. It's about the passing of the Pope and to me at least, the unprecedented response to it. And it seems, and I wonder whether I've been sort of cowed by people like you, Gary. I don't mean that meanly, into not recognising the positives. Because this Pope, Francis, does seem to have reached people in ways, it sounds like a beer advert now, it does seem to have reached parts that other popes have not reached. And I'm interested in why. And I think that's not only an interesting question, but potentially an eternal one. And it's funny because you point that out. You say, in all honesty, I do not understand your support for the Catholic Church. Why are you prepared to gloss over the historic, horrendous abuses perpetrated by this wicked organisation? It doesn't seem to align with your moral positions on politics or wider societal matters. It kind of does if you get to the purity of the message of treating people well, but it doesn't if you focus upon the corruption of that message undertaken over centuries by representatives of the Catholic Church. But it depends where you are, because Christine is in Milan, I think. Both of these messages at the top of my Blue Sky page. Being a Catholic is different in other countries. I went to a Roman Catholic school under Irish priests, but then lived in Italy and got married there. The Italian priests were horrified at my descriptions of my Catholic upbringing. And Pope John Paul, John the 23rd, apparently, was Papa Buona, the good Pope. I wonder if we get a sequel with Pope Francis, the second good Pope. Sean is in Enfield. Sean, what made you pick up the phone?
Just wanted to answer a question about what being a Catholic meant to me, I suppose.
Yeah, good man.
In my life experience, it's meant a lot of shame and guilt, but almost in a positive light.
Right.
In this sense, I hate to see people struggling, or like in my house in Ireland when I was growing up, if you didn't want to finish your dinner, you'd always be told half the word starving. Be grateful, finish your meal. And,
I'd wondered where you were going then when you said almost in a good way, because shame and guilt are terrible, crippling afflictions in so many ways. But what you describe is a constant awareness of your own good fortune in some contexts. It shouldn't make you feel guilty necessarily, but that's the way that Catholicism has traditionally landed.
Yes, it's like, I suppose it's just always I'm always aware of my misdoings in the past, but then I have that positivity where I was always taught there's always time for redemption. You'll always be forgiven if you do the right thing. And like, by no means am I a practicing Catholic, but I'm very much so a cultural Catholic, and I was raised in the church.
What does that mean for someone baffled by the distinction? I don't think I am, but let's pretend I am. What do you mean? Obviously, it means that you don't go to church, but what does cultural Catholic mean?
I suppose, just in my opinion, it's how I was raised. I went to a Catholic school. I was always have this deep-rooted feeling. It sounds a bit Orwellian, like you're always being watched, whether it's God or my granny and granddad who's passed away. I always have this feeling that my loved ones who aren't here anymore are here, which is comforting, but it's also daunting when you're doing what... Do you know what I mean? So
yes, I do. Well, very well, actually. I just sort of dissipated a bit for me over the years. I don't know whether it has for you, but as a young man, as a teenager, I was terrified of the consequences of some of the things that I did. I mean, truly, I remember, I won't go into too much detail, but the night of a very significant moment in a young person's life, I thought I was going to get struck by lightning on the way downstairs. But happily I wasn't. The point is, of course, that if that fear that you describe has stopped you doing things that you should not have done, then it's been a force for good in life, even if it hasn't always worked.
Yes, absolutely. And it's also always given me the feeling that if I've done wrong, I can always, if not right the wrong, change my behaviour moving forward.
That's a big thing. That's a really big thing. So you're never, I mean, you're never kind of consigned forever. I mean, at least while you're on this mortal coil, you're never consigned forever. Redemption is always within reach. That, and, you know, the more time has passed since that call from Leeds, that line about there, but for the grace of God, if everybody really truly felt that way, then the world would be a very, very different place. If you saw somebody homeless and thought, crikey, that could be me, your attitude towards that homeless person would be different. The effort now that is put into trying to persuade populations, this is as old as religion itself, it's nothing new. It's just having a bit of a heyday at the minute. The effort put into persuading populations that other people are better or worse than them, or that some immutable characteristic like ethnicity or or gender can be the reason why you're allowed to hate somebody is something that the best religions would oppose, and Catholicism historically has not been in that space. It has inculcated senses of superiority up to and including killing non-believers or killing people who believe the wrong things. But Sean and previous callers speak of a very different church from the one I grew up in, and maybe I'm a cultural Catholic. A couple of people asking whether I believe in God, to which the answer is it depends what day it is. Not for a while, but I did relatively recently. I did when my dad died, passionately, devoutly. The only way I could talk to him was if I believed in God, so I did. I talked to him at church and I talked to him at football, which is perhaps a touch of the Bill Shankleys to it. 10:55 is the time. Stephen is in Horsham. Stephen, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for taking the call.
Very welcome.
Well, this is a bit of an odd call. I'm Jewish.
Yes.
Obviously, I don't follow the theology of the Catholic Church, but to be honest, I don't follow the theology of my own faith very much either. So I'm non-observant, but I am very Jewish and a firm believer in my ethnicity. But my point is this: that even as a Jew, I think that the position of the Pope is more important than any world leader, more important than any prime minister, any president, any monarch. And the reason is this, that the position of the Pope is one in which he can speak to humanity. He may well be a theologian. He may well teach his own flock the theology of his church and how to behave, but actually he reminds us that there is something beyond ourselves. There is a mystique about the Pope and about the grandeur of Vatican City and about the holiness, if you like, of St. Peter's in Rome, where I've been many times.
Have you?
Yes, yeah, and I've taken communion there as well. And because
you can't say that on the radio.
Well,
you'll get struck by that lightning I was talking about a minute ago.
No, I think it is a very holy place, actually.
Yes, it is.
And I just think that the Pope. You see, other religious leaders, and I have great respect for my own Chief Rabbi, Mervis, wonderful man, great man, and the last Chief Rabbi, Jonathan Sacks, who was, I think, one of the great philosophers of the last century.
Yes.
But religious leaders generally speak to their own community. They teach, and they teach their own community. That goes, I think, for most faiths.
Yeah.
As far as the Catholic Church is concerned, the Pope speaks beyond his community.
That's a really good point.
He speaks to the entirety of humanity and reminds us that there is something beyond ourselves.
That's something that unites us all. I mean, you could almost depict that as arrogance, because I've never really clocked that before. The Pope truly believes that he is talking to the whole world, because the whole world is Catholic. It's just that some people haven't got there yet.
Well, yes, I'm afraid it's a bit like Muslims saying, well, everybody's a Muslim, really.
Yes.
They were born Muslim. I mean, you sort of sidestep some of these arguments. But so far as the Pope is concerned, and obviously there have been good popes and bad popes in the past, and the Catholic Church hasn't always been a friend to the Jews, but
that's for sure.
Far from it, actually. But I think certainly in recent years, particularly with John Paul I and John Paul II, and really the whole lineage of popes in the past, since the war, I suppose, the Second World War, have been people of inspiration, actually,
and global figures. That's a great point that you've made. They are, and there aren't many global figures really, and even the global figures that we've got increasingly seem to be focused upon their own purview, their own very specific constituencies. I guess in the case of some politicians, very, very, very much so. But the Pope is a global figure, the uniting force, the uniting nature of humanity itself. This has been an absolute education for me, because I perhaps had missed the power and pertinence of the individual as opposed to the simple incumbent of the institution. But Stephen really driving home the role that this particular Pope has played in pushing forward things which we should almost all welcome, which I suppose is a timely moment to remind you of the words of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who claimed this weekend that there had been a major shift in global leaderships and that evil is being defeated by the hand of God. How else would you greet the passing of a Pope? And J.D. Vance, of course, met with him shortly before he passed away, which did remind me in some ways of Liz Truss meeting with the late Queen, which means Donald Trump has now copied Liz Truss on the economic front, and J.D. Vance arguably has played a similar role on the mortal coil front.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Minutes after 11 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I've got some great guests today coming in, actually. Fatima Whitbread will be joining us this hour to tell us about her latest Wizard Wheeze. Fatima, I don't know if you know her. I don't know if you've listened to her on Full Disclosure. You should, really, if you've been paying attention latterly, because she rang in on a subject. She was sitting in the back of a car and the driver had the radio on, so she got stuck into the phone we were having, and halfway through the conversation I was getting all these messages saying you've got to get her on Full Disclosure, so I did. But she is truly, a slightly overused phrase, she is truly a force of nature, and she'll be telling us about her latest project later today. And then a lovely couple who I know as well personally, who've made a film. This is an incredibly shameless indulgence in a personal enthusiasm, but I mentioned to you a while ago a film called The Rubber-Keyed Wonder, the story of the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which for certain people around and about my age is a truly iconic bit of kit, and it's a magnificent movie, and I thought I'd invite the husband and wife team who've made it to meet you before 1 o'clock today, before we hand over to Sheila. But we turn our attention next to a story which I would really like to have known what the late Pope made of, a story I'm somewhat surprised to see on a Labour Party or on a Labour government's to-do list, a surprise that is compounded when we read that honest Bob Jenrick has greeted it enthusiastically. The late Pope's values, the things that he seemed to stand for, seem to me to be almost anathema to what Yvette Cooper is expected to announce today. And sometimes when I find myself thinking things like that, I find myself wondering whether I am missing something. And so there'll be a bit of a why to this question as well as a what. Migrant crime league tables will be published by the government for the first time under plans due to be announced this week. Now, I'm going to own up to a degree of footballification here, I think. And that footballification is the word that I use to describe political loyalty that can sometimes blind you to political reality. So if somebody like Robert Jenrick had come out with this, I would be very confident in saying it is absolutely blatant, a blatant appeal to racists. It is a blatant attempt to steal Nigel Farage's breakfast by appealing to precisely the kind of nativist bile that those two men seem to dine on daily. But if a Labour government is bringing it in, I have to remind myself that you have to react to the policy, not the person, not the politician. You have to react to the politics, not the politician. So if a Labour government is bringing it in, I have to argue that this is blatant. This is hideous. This is a desperate attempt to steal Nigel Farage's lunch. This is a desperate attempt to appeal to nativist hatred. People who truly think that the country you come from is an indication of who you are and what you are, and that makes you inferior to them. Listen, I want to be wrong because it is a Labour government, but because we don't historically associate Labour governments with far-right rhetoric, although that seems to be changing, not just in this country. But I cannot see, for the life of me, why else they would be doing this. So the figures will be published by the end of the year. She was originally told that it may not be possible. Apparently it is. Albanians, Romanians and Poles are expected to be among the worst offenders. That will be largely, but not entirely, because of statistics, basic statistics, and the nature of some criminal gangs. What do we gain as a population from this? So the argument from the government is that it would allow the country to come to terms with the countries to which deportation of foreign criminals is most urgent. So we establish which countries have the most criminals committing crime, or the most citizens committing crimes in this country, and therefore we can come to an arrangement with them about achieving a deportation, which makes me wonder why they need to publish the league tables. I don't know what else this is designed to do but to feed hatred. And I mean, you can tell from my voice, I really want to be wrong. I'd love to be able to see a sensible rationale for this policy that doesn't just sound like giving permission to people to hate Poles or to hate not that the kind of people that they're appealing to need any permission at all to hate Poles or Romanians or Albanians. Not only, a Labour source has told The Times, not only are we deporting foreign criminals at a rate never seen when Chris Philp and Robert Jenrick were in charge at the Home Office. Listen, it's a bit of a blunt instrument, but deporting foreign criminals is not as controversial as the idea of the league table to me. You're more than welcome to tell me why I'm wrong about that. But we will also be publishing far more information about that cohort of offenders. Why? 0345 60 60973. So you can speculate all you want on this. I am. Why is the Labour government determined to publish far more information about the nationalities of criminals than ever before? And you can come at this from whatever angle you want. You can, and I honestly don't think you will, because I can't see that you could. Explain to me why this isn't as unpleasant as it appears. And what are we supposed to do with the information? And so if we discover that Poles commit more crimes than, I don't know, Spaniards, are we supposed to treat Poles and Spaniards differently? What am I supposed to do with this information? It's not ethnicity, it's nationality. So, I mean, are they going to publish the fact that the massive majority of crimes committed in this country are committed by non-foreigners? Just in terms of simple statistics, that's not an opinion, it's counting. Are we going to start having conversations about the white middle class and the white working class and their peculiar proclivity for certain kinds of crimes? What else is the reasoning behind this? It's actually... this happens to me occasionally. I'm simultaneously chilled to the core by it, but also convinced that I must be missing something. Politicians return to Parliament today after the Easter recess. The announcement is expected to be made today. The question I want you to answer is this. Why are they doing it? 0345 6060 973. Why do you think they are doing it? Okay? Because for the life of me, I cannot see what the benefit will be. To discover that Albanians, Romanians and Poles, as is already widely accepted, are going to be among the worst offenders in this country helps us do what? Isabel and a couple of you are being very glass half full on this one and suggesting that it will actually show what a small percentage of crime is committed by immigrants. Well, yes, that's also true, but it doesn't explain why you need the league table. They could just tell us repeatedly about the proportion or the percentage of crime that is committed by British citizens and set it up against the percentage of crime that is committed by non-British citizens. You bring poverty into the equation and it's likely that there's going to be a higher incidence of crime among the poorest parts of the population. Do we know what star sign? Is that? I'm going to Google it. Is there a star sign that's particularly prone to criminality? How would you phrase the question? Or do we need to ask ChatGPT this one? Is any star sign more criminal? That's not best phrase. Let me have a look. Zodiac signs most likely to become criminals. I've got it. Librans. Libran. Are you a Libran? Any Librans in the house? Any Librans in the house? No. Well, there you go. You see. So here you go. Here it is. Behaviour researchers have compiled studies to look at signs that have the highest number of criminals. Listen. It may not be entirely kosher, this research, but it matters. Apparently, it's important to work out. Sagittarius, mostly optimistic. Libra. This sign has the most criminal records and is usually well armed and highly dangerous. That seems unlikely to me. Perhaps I'm reading the wrong sources. But you see what I mean? Why would the nationality of a criminal be more interesting to me than the star sign? The New York Post has done them in ascending order. Good news if you're a Taurus, bad news if you are a Virgo. The most dangerous sign of the zodiac. More Virgos caught committing crimes than any other star sign. You take my point. It seems to me to be about as helpful to the bigger picture, to the greater population, than identifying the nationality of offenders. So I suppose I also want to hear from you. If you're a foreign-born person living in this country, there's two stories. I should have knitted these two together. The world's best cancer doctors, scientists and researchers are being put off moving to or staying in the UK by politicians' rhetoric on immigration, according to a leaked report. This is analysis being studied by the Cabinet Office and the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. The report says politicians' messaging about the UK, including around immigration in general, has a direct impact on our ability to attract and retain talent. So you read that in one newspaper this morning, and then you read in another that migrant league tables will be published by the government for the first time. I want you to tell me why you think that they are doing this. 0345 6060 973. I will give you the money myself. As the great Les Dennis famously said, if you can make it sound like a good idea, if you could just make it sound less ugly than it initially sounds, I'll take my medicine on footballification. I don't think I'd be asking, maybe I'm being a bit unfair on myself, maybe I would be asking this question if it was being brought in by let's say a Rishi Sunak or a John Major. If it was being brought in by an honest Bob Jenrick or a Nigel Farage, I'd be in no doubt whatsoever about what it was designed to do. And maybe the design is the same. Maybe it is an attempt to move into this far-right nativist territory, whereby they're enforcing all the Twitter accounts that think that your ethnicity or your nationality or your religion, of course, or your gender is an indication of your likelihood to commit certain crimes. But I can't, at 14 minutes past 11, for the life of me, see what the positives of this would be. Home Office will say, it will help us come to arrangements with the countries that we need to have better deportation deals with, to which I would say, well, why do you need to tell me? What is this designed to do? And that is my question to you. What do you think this is designed to do? Because it can't be designed to do the thing they say that it's designed to do, because they could do that without publishing the details, without releasing the details. And listen, I may have put you off slightly if you're in this category that I'm about to describe, but I don't want to put you off. Well, why do you welcome this? Why do you welcome this? And if you welcome it for, dare I say, the most obvious reasons, I'd cautiously suggest you're highly unlikely ever to vote for the Labour Party in your life. Why would anybody welcome this? And if you are a foreign-born resident of these islands, I'd particularly like to know how this makes you feel. Especially when we set it alongside the story that we may discuss specifically later or later this week about people now being put off coming here, people we need, cancer doctors, scientists, researchers, being actively put off coming to or staying in this country because of rhetoric on immigration. That's in your left hand, right? And in your right hand, you've got a Labour government announcing that they're going to start publishing league tables of foreign criminals. Tell me those two things aren't linked. Tell me that if somebody is not minded to come here or is thinking of leaving their job as a cancer doctor because of the way we talk about immigrants now in this country, tell me that a Labour government announcing league tables of crimes according to nationality isn't going to add to the sense that you are here, your presence is being suffered, your presence is being endured. Why else would they be doing this? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
17 minutes after 11. Scousers, I suppose, the Irish in the past have been associated with criminality, obviously unfairly, because the massive majority of people from any demographic are not going to be criminals. But we live in a world where, whether you're Donald Trump or a Daily Telegraph leader writer, you find somebody from a certain background doing something bad and you claim that everybody from that background is bad. I remember Farage sitting in this studio explaining why he didn't want to live next door to Romanians. And I sort of said, well, hang on a minute, your neighbours live next door to Germans. What's the difference? Still don't know what he thinks the difference is, but maybe league tables like this would help him make some sort of warped, quasi-racist point. Otherwise, I cannot see what the reasoning behind this is. A little more detail before we go to Lee and then Michael. After that, it could, of course, be you. There are just under 20,000 people awaiting deportation. This was at the end of last year. We want to ensure the public, this is a Home Office source, is kept better informed about the number of foreign criminals awaiting deportation. I buy that. You can have that. And it may be that the rhetoric of X or Twitter or the Tory party, increasingly interchangeable phenomena, it may be that the message being received by many people is that figure is actually much, much higher. So that there may be, and it's going to be desperate, but I want you to try, a rationale behind this. and what crimes they have committed. All right, you can have that. I want to know what kind of criminals are getting deported in the context of what they have actually done. But where they come from? Why? Why would you put that on this list? Why would you measure that any more than their star sign or their religion? Well, don't say that out loud. They'll probably introduce that next. Lee's in Bicester. Lee, what would you like to say?
Hello there, first-time caller. Thanks for having me.
Welcome, Lee. Thanks for choosing a nice, easy topic.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, but I think I come at this first from the angle that transparency is a good thing.
Yes.
And I think the Labour strategy behind this is to use it as a tool to stop the spread of disinformation.
Wow, okay.
If they put that information out there, they prevent reform and far-right groups from using that on social media, etc., as a potential conspiracy. You know, if you link it to the incident in Southport and the terrible incident there, and there was public, widespread disinformation on social media because the information wasn't transparent. So I think this is a strategy where they'll hopefully highlight, actually, it's probably the scale of crime committed by foreign nationals in the grand scheme of things.
And so it will actually look small.
People think. Yes, I think that's what it will come out at, that the numbers will look small in the overall comparison, and it'll prevent reform and the far right from actually
claiming
spreading disinformation
everywhere all foreigners are criminals, and especially if you set it alongside the offending rates for the quotes native population end quotes, then some of their jingoistic and xenophobic foxes will be shot, so to speak.
I believe so. If that's not the case and the problem is actually a larger scale than we think it is, then it surely indicates that there's some kind of policy or something what needs to be brought in to try and tackle it. So,
but they could do that anyway, couldn't they? They could do that anyway. And also, I mean, what would it have to look like for you to decide? I don't think you ever would, but for you to decide that the problem here is not the people committing the crimes. The problem here is Poles. Or the problem here is Romanians. That's why I hope you're right, but I am reminded, and in fact, John's been in touch to take me to task. He says, I love you, but Farage didn't explain why he didn't want to live next door to Romanians, James. He just claimed that everybody already knew why. So why would, at what point would I be expected to go, I don't like Romanians, rather than just saying I don't like criminals wherever they're from?
Yeah, I understand your point, but I think it's just trying a preemptive measure to try and counter what you're saying, lies coming down.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that two politicians can do the same thing for two very different reasons.
Absolutely, and it's got to be part of a wider strategy and long-term thinking from Labour, because if they're not transparent, if you look at all the rumours and misinformation what's been spread since the election, if they don't own that information and control the narrative,
then it's going to be all over Facebook. And to be fair, exactly. It might be like trying to get a genie back in the bottle anyway, and we can form an orderly queue of callers to LBC, perhaps not this show, but certainly others who'll say, well, I don't believe anything the government tells me anyway. So they're on a hiding to nothing in those so-called brains. But generally speaking, for this fascinating and crucial part of the population that is susceptible to reason, that is open to reasoning, but is currently being bombarded with misinformation, then Lee, first call, suggesting that is the people for whom this is designed, in which case it could become a good thing. And I get excuse from my footballification accusation, self-accusation. I thought I'd do a Catholic thing this hour in honour of the late Pope and do a little bit of rhetorical self-flagellation. Opus Dei would be proud of me. But maybe you can actually look at the same policy being introduced by different politicians. So honest Bob Jenrick is cheering it from the rooftops. This is the fellow, of course, that ordered the murals at an asylum processing centre for, I'll say it again, unaccompanied children, to be painted over in case arriving alone in this country in a boat in which you could have perished, and arriving at a institutional concrete bunker, if it had some pictures of Mickey Mouse on the wall, then it might be too warm and welcoming. Robert Jenrick lay awake at night tossing and turning about the idea of some pictures of Mickey Mouse making some desperate Afghan refugee aged 10 feel a little bit happy for 9 seconds, so he got them painted over. He loves this policy. It doesn't mean that it's being introduced to appeal to people like him. Or does Lee sound a little bit too glass half full for you today? Michael is in Croydon. Michael, what would you like to say?
Hello, thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. I think it's just there to create a divide. Government's never really transparent. What's it going to really serve?
That's what I'm asking. Hang on a minute. This is my phone in. You're supposed to be telling me. What's it going to really serve? That's outrageous.
I mean, it depends. You go to a certain area like Scotland, it's going to be predominantly white.
Yeah.
So I don't see how that's going to really serve anything. I think we're just following America and what America does. It's the same thing America's doing by sending people to El Salvador. Certain people are criminals.
Yes.
Now we've adopted that same.
Well, America
narrative.
is, of course, sending people who aren't criminals and haven't been through any due process, and that definitely is designed to appeal to a sort of nativist anger. The Abrego Garcia case being the most obvious, and they think it's a vote winner. By the way, the man mistakenly deported to El Salvador, who they are determined to leave there to prove political points. Do you think that is really what the Labour government is appealing to? People who just want all the foreigners deported, whether they're criminals or not?
I think so, because I wouldn't be surprised if he's looking at Farage as gaining traction. I'm thinking, hang on a minute, he's onto something here.
This is two calls who've set up this conversation in the most magnificent way. You and the last fella, you and Lee. Lee seeing it as very much a positive that is designed to shoot the racist foxes that are running wild through British politics at the moment, and you seeing it as an attempt to unleash their own foxes in the hope of wooing the people who are running around behind them. How do we know who's right?
That's the question.
It is. What if the numbers come out and they do what Lee said they would do and demonstrate how ridiculous it is to claim that criminality, if you care about criminality, then you should be more worried about Romanians than you should about Brits? If it does the opposite of what you're expecting. That's optimistic, isn't it? That they think that
very optimistic, because we know what human nature is like. And we'll only look to see what we want to see, regardless of what polls are showing you.
That is the point. That's right. But this is what I mean by the fascinating constituency of people who are open to reason. You know, so you say some immigrants commit a crime, or some Irish people commit a crime, or some black people commit a crime, and I want to be given permission to hate all immigrants, or to hate all black people, or to hate all Irish. And those people are getting more attention at the moment from politicians in this country and the United States of America than at any point in living memory. They used to be confined to the British National Party or the National Front. Now they're getting their toes tickled by almost everybody, certainly by honest Bob Jenrick's brand of Tory, and obviously by Farage's outfit. I want to be given permission to hate everybody who is of a certain demographic. And the idea that there's loads of people who are currently falling into the trap of hatred who could be rescued from it by more information. Oh boy, that's a big finger-crossing moment for a government to undertake. My next caller is in Stevenage, and my colleague has provided a phonetic guide to how to pronounce your name, but it hasn't helped me at all. Is it Fike?
Yes, you.
Well, in that case, I apologise to my colleague. The phonetic guide was absolutely perfect, but looking at it, I thought it might have been Fike. But that's me reading, not them writing. Go on, what do you want to say, Fike?
Oh, I came here in 2010. I've got 13 years of education. Years of university.
I'm going to have to sort your phone line out. I couldn't tell whether it was a verbal glitch of your own or whether I was actually losing every word in five, but we'll get you back shortly. And I think that Fike was addressing the question of how does this make you feel as somebody who has never committed a crime in their lives, but belongs to the demographic that is now going to be published like a kind of Saturday football results. Poles 204, Romanians 206. It's a late win for the Romanians on who's committed the most crimes this year. What is the point of this? Val is in Bracknell. Val, what would you like to say?
Hello. Hi, James. It's really simple, actually, because reform is very close to Labour Party in some constituency, and there is a council elections coming, and this is it, basically. They're trying to pick up some vote from reform. That's all. It's pretty simple. And by the way, in France, there is a law which forbids the police to say the nationality of any criminal, okay?
Really?
So there is a reason behind. Yeah, there is a law. You cannot say which nationality is any criminal in France by law, yeah?
But I know the nationality of some criminals, some terrorists that have committed atrocities in France. I know biographical background.
Yeah, you know that because, there is a media and there is a lot of information going on, but generally police is forbidden to make such statements. Yeah,
I've always wondered why, Val, we have these things in news headlines. Polish shoplifter. I've always wondered what that is designed to do, but I think we know deep down, don't we?
Yeah, we know. And by the way, about the transparency argument the gentleman before me made,
yes,
it doesn't make sense because let's say if the Southport guy was a Muslim and asylum seeker, does this justify somebody burning a mosque? I mean, what transparency?
We've done that. I made that point last week or the week before.
Oh, okay,
I mean, in terms, I don't think that's the point he was making. He used that as a broad illustration of the damage that misinformation can do.
It makes sense. But anyway, it's about the election. Yeah,
just an attempt to say, hey, we're going after these people. Well, what if you're both right? What if they're sitting around a table at Downing Street and the good guys, I'm obsessed with that cartoons. Do you remember those old cartoons where you had the devil on one shoulder and an angel, a devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other? So the angel the angel is saying we can defuse this bomb by pointing out to people that the relationship between nationality and criminality is nowhere near as clear or as bad or as provocative as these far-right people claim it is. So we can actually give people the facts they need to see through the racist provocations. And then the devil on the Prime Minister's shoulder is saying, yeah, but of course, if that doesn't work, then this makes us look like we care about the things they've been told to care about that aren't true. So they could portray it then as win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this number may show that some nationality has more criminals, but what? I mean, this is so minuscule compared to the overall all people. Let's say 99.99 Romanians are pretty decent guys.
Of course.
So what if one
I don't know. It is the eternal question. It applies to almost every group of people that gets demonized by a certain type of politician. Here is one of their ilk doing something, therefore you now have permission to hate all of them. And I don't think that's simplistic, sadly. I used to, but it's pretty much policy now. It's 11:31. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:34. Maybe the league tables will show the racists they are wrong, writes Jago. Maybe it will show statistically that most crimes are and always have been committed by British people. Your introduction assumes that the figures that come out will support the view that foreigners are criminals. I think the figures that come out will only contain foreign criminals awaiting deportation, mate. So the early hope we might have that this doesn't look like a desperate attempt to steal far-right breakfasts is beginning to dissipate. If it's only looking at foreign criminals awaiting deportation, then what possible point can there be behind this proposal other than to give us permission to hate some nationalities more than others, or to associate some nationalities with criminality more than others? So that, I'm afraid, is going into retreat. Lee's nicely argued point about transparency, I think, unless you disagree, I think it's now on a very sticky wicket. And the alternative then becomes even uglier, as No Hostages says in a message to my Blue Sky account. If you believe that there is, for example, a Nigerian crime problem, but the data doesn't support it, you won't question your belief. You'll question the data. You'll just assume that the police are incompetent or that the government is hiding the truth. This is all about appealing to xenophobes. They go on, if someone welcomes it for nationality, then why not race or religion? It would make life so much easier for bigots and the Tory press headline writers. You look at the ethnicity, the nationality, the religion, the star sign of people that paint over cartoon murals in asylum processing centres for unaccompanied children. Would we learn anything? Would you learn anything about me if it was a middle-aged, middle-class white man that had ordered that crime against morality to be committed? I don't think you would. So what do you learn about that Romanian over there if it turns out that there are more Romanians awaiting deportation than Albanians? Or I don't know, and I can't see anything. Despite clinging desperately to the carcass of Lee's explanation, I'm sinking. Max is in Solihull. Max, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thank you for letting me on. I think this is actually incredibly dangerous, and anyone who has any reasonable knowledge of statistics will know why. The reason for that is that correlation is not causation.
Hallelujah.
And when you were talking about variable A, which is nationality, and variable B, which is criminality, you're creating a link there that will make people say there is a causal relationship between it. Now, I can bore you with the statistics, but I'll do it very, very quickly just to sort of say what needs to happen is you need to be doing what's called a multivariate linear regression. So you look at the relationship between different variables and you extrapolate that.
Right.
That's something that if it isn't published alongside this, it is definitely going to do more harm than good. Because what it will do, people will have their own biases when they look at this information. If they think that Albanians are more likely, or Poles, or Irish people, or Nigerians are more likely to cause crime, they'll look at that figure on there. And we've seen this happening in two different areas, especially used by the alt-right.
Yeah.
So firstly, in America, when you're looking at prison populations and criminality, and also we've seen similar things happening in the UK in relation to...
We've seen Trump say it about genes. He's talked about immigrants having defective genes, Genes. I mean, that's about as close to eugenics as you can get.
Yeah, I can't see this leading anywhere good. And the problem is that bad data is more harmful than no information. And so if they were going to do a full proper analysis of this and demonstrate, and by the way, having looked at some of this data in the past, first generation immigrants commit crime at a lower rate than native born people. Once you get into second generation, they're pretty much the same as native born. You do end up seeing some correlations for other factors. So, for example, and I'm not saying this to stigmatise anyone, but certain conditions you can be brought up in if you're a product of trauma, if you've grown up in an unstable environment. And this is the thing, that should be used to target support to those people. What we're seeing instead is a discourse that seems to be pointing in a direction of policy that is going to be used to demonise people rather than help and support the communities that are currently disadvantaged and are more at risk of falling into criminality.
And they're not, and there's no way that that's what they're planning to do, because they're only looking at people awaiting deportation. So all of the variables you've described, poverty, instability, trauma, are colour blind. They're nationality blind. And if they were really keen to prevent criminality that is born of some of those conditions, then, as you say, we'd be looking at the whole population, because the massive majority of people in all of those categories, simply by weight of numbers, is going to be native Brits.
Yeah, and I think there's a simple lie defeats a complicated truth, and I think I don't know if you read Adam Rutherford's How Not to Be Racist. And it's a fantastic book, and you'll realise that despite him writing that, there are still people who do not use that information. He didn't. It wasn't like game over. Adam Rutherford was correct. Here's the evidence. The difficulty is when you start putting information into the public domain that can be misused or misinterpreted. That's actually very dangerous, and that will put specific groups at more risk. So whoever's at the bottom of that league table, either people who have that identity, or, and I think this is important, people who perceive someone to have that identity. Because, as we saw with Islamophobia, there were Hindus, there were Sikhs who were experiencing discrimination in relation to that.
It's about giving permission, isn't it, in a way? Yeah. Tacit permission to hate. Yeah, this is where I get concerned, is because when you look at where you look at good policy brings people together to solve a problem. Bad policy creates division and ultimately creates risks that are then harder to put back together afterwards. You're a statistician, I think.
I've done some statistics, but I'm not going to call myself a statistician.
But you have a particular interest in some of these issues in this field, or just generally?
Yeah, so I did start doing some statistical work around the British Social Study and the European Social Survey.
Oh wow!
And so, but that's around attitudes, and so this is where you start understanding how you use a regression model, how you establish correlation. But you need really big and good data sets, and I think the issue is at the moment, you won't have that, because you won't have the background information to put into that data set. This is just a simple league table, and simple league tables are very often more dangerous. You create oversimplified solutions.
Of course. So you lead me to the question that you've obliquely answered already, and you don't have to answer it. But why do you think they're doing this in the way that we think that they are doing it?
if my hypothesis on this is wanting to appear tough on immigration. And that's because they look at where they think they're losing ground to other parties. And so they think, well, let's say something tough on this. And the thing that concerns me is it's not as simple as just saying something. Words do have consequences, especially when you've got this kind of level of platform. Yeah. It might sound like this is a vote winner in an election. The danger is even saying this will lead to people, some of the conversations that we'll be having around it won't be the conversation you and I are having. Some of this will be.
Well, I can show you. I can show you what the conversation is, because oddly, while you've been talking, I've received these 3 messages. I've received a lot more than 3. Penn in Highgate says, "What a brilliant call, James." Mike says, "This bloke's very good." And Joe's been in touch to say, "I genuinely can't believe that LBC and James O'Brien have hit an all-time low of now apologising for the foreign criminals before they've even committed a crime now. The contempt for the British English from this show absolutely amazes me." Leaving aside temporarily the, quite spectacular logical inconsistency there, that perhaps is the kind of person that Keir Starmer is trying to appeal to. People who look at a foreigner and just see a criminal who hasn't committed a crime yet.
So this is where I think some bad politics comes from. You look at who is on the margins, who is an easy target. And if you look at how, tribal or group dynamics work, how do you push yourself into the centre? Well, you can push yourself closer into the centre by pushing the people on the edges further out. Yeah. That does not create harmonious societies. That does not create a better living environment for anybody, because you're just reliant on you being the in-group at that time. That's the danger of this. And I know it's not talking about complicated policies. This is the danger. Once you start having this discussion, the genie's out the bottle. It gets very difficult to put back in again. Yeah. But they're now going to have to produce a multivariate analysis to actually look at what are the causal factors, and then start looking at policy to, let's say at the end of it, they find out, well, there are issues that we have with criminal gangs from this country. But the problem is you're not going to find that from a league table in that sense. You need to be doing multivariate linear regression.
And whatever mode of research they undertake, the usefulness of the research and the wisdom of publishing it are 2 very different things.
Yeah, and if you look at actually a lot of the statistical analysis, and I'm quite often looking at the reports that come out of different government departments. When you look at those reports, you'll have a summary overview, and very often you'll have the headlines published off that summary overview. When you look at the actual full report, it tells quite a different story very often, and people do cherry pick data to make the case that they want to make. And that once that league table's produced, you'll have some newspapers writing one set of headlines and others writing another set of headlines. So I don't see where this goes in a good direction.
Oh, well, I did for a couple of minutes. I could see a vaguely positive analysis of it, thanks to Lee in Bicester, but just down the road in Solihull, it's disappearing over the horizon. Max, thank you. You clearly are expert in this field, and are probably too modest to say so, but it's calls like yours that are most helpful to us. 11:45 is the time. Greg's been in touch to say you are using the same type of logic that protected the grooming gangs, which is, again, perhaps an indication of the kind of intellect that Keir Starmer thinks he needs to appeal to now. There you go. It's 11:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49 is the time. You have probably heard me say to people both on the programme and on the Full Disclosure podcast, if they are engaged in really important work, then I often say to them, do let me know if we can do anything to help. And I mean it, as will become clear shortly when I tell you why Fatima Whitbread has just come into the studio. But before that, I want to clean up or finish off the conversation we were just having about these new league tables of crime committed by foreign nationals, particularly awaiting deportation, because Alfred in Bedford responds to this story, I think, Alfred, in quite a personal way.
James, long-time fan. I love listening to the show. Thank you. Originally, I'm from Albania, so obviously it's one of the nations that yes. You mentioned in the beginning. I'm not sure, James, what the government, the Labour government, is trying to achieve with showing these league tables. Yeah. What I'm hoping for is that they will show to the country, maybe a certain generation, which I work, because of the nature of my business, I work with a lot of people that maybe are retired, and a lot of them, James, are fans and followers of Nigel Farage, and obviously they voted for Brexit.
Yes.
And it's on a personal basis. I know that if I was to tell them straight away where I was from originally, they would be very. They would be shocked. They would be maybe wary of me. But because I've got the same 340 customers, and I see them every 8 weeks, and I'm probably the only person they see for a very long time, or maybe the only person they see in those 8 weeks. Once they get to know me and they understand that they can communicate with me, and I understand them and they understand me, and we've got thinking.
This is the classic, isn't it? You're this is the thing that we discovered after Brexit, although I'm sure lots of people knew about it before, is that they say Albanian and they don't mean you. So we've got to get rid of all the Albanians. And you say, Alfred, I'm Albanian, remember? And they go, oh, no, I don't mean you.
Exactly that, James. I've got customers that are lovely people, and for example, one of them I can't name, or they've got lovely businesses, and she came from her holiday. She went to see her son, who's migrated to Spain with his Polish wife and their kids. She's English, but she's been married to a lovely Italian gentleman for 50 odd years. She went to see her son, who's half English, half Italian, in Spain, married to a Polish lady who she says she's lovely. She went on holiday in Spain, then came back, and I said, how was the holiday? How did everything go? She was, it was lovely, beautiful weather, beautiful food. Came to Luton Airport, and my goodness me, she goes, Alfred, you can't, you come in and you can't hear anyone speaking English, and all you can hear and all you can see is Polish people and Romanians. Then she goes, oh my God, not Polish, because I know, my daughter-in-law is Polish, and they are lovely people, but my goodness, there were so many Romanians. And obviously there's the perception that my countrymen have, rightly, wrongly, what I'm hoping, James, is that these tables will show that crime needs to be dealt with, no matter where you're from.
But a lot of the mythology around crime, it could perhaps be exploded by these sort of statistics, these sort of figures. I tell you what, I thought my studio guest could talk the hind legs off a donkey, but you're giving us some competition at the moment. But I understand why. It's because this affects you very personally, and you will be the only Albanian person that most of your clients have ever met, and yet somehow their perception of Albanians is not going to be defined by the one they've actually met. It's going to be defined by the ones that Nigel Farage and his mates tell them about. Speaking of studio guest, Fatima Whitbread MBE, world javelin champion, record holder, Olympic medalist, and latterly in life, tireless campaigner for children in care and children leaving care who often need even more help than the children who are still being, at least in some way, looked after.
Yes.
And anyone who knows you will know that the reason why you're so passionate about this area is that you spent a lot of time in care yourself growing up.
Absolutely. I mean, lived experience, and my Olympic platform has enabled me to launch the Fatima's UK campaign and summit, which we will be having over the next 2 days, tomorrow, 23rd and 4th, at the Guildhall in London. So come along if you want to support us. But we have united the 4 nations together to improve the life outcomes for children in the care system, and that's so important. It's I'm very passionate about it, as you know, James.
107 children every day going into the system.
Yes, 33% of all local authorities are seeing a weekly increase. I mean, we have 110,000 in the care system as we speak. It's frightening, really, but the care system, as we see it, currently doesn't serve the purpose it should. They work in silos, and therefore, that collaboration and partnership which we're doing to bring and harness the power of one voice will actually be able to help set them up for success and not further damage them as it currently is at the moment.
It's a remarkable assembly of the great and the good. What will success look like? What is, in your mind, in 2 days' time, you'll sit back and allow yourself a moment of satisfaction. What would you be looking to
Well, it's our first annual summit. It's like a G20. We've got 110 collaborators, 760 stakeholders that covers the whole of the care system sector, society as well, and local authorities, virtual heads of school education. Obviously, we have that collaboration of partnership for shared good practice and knowledge, which is one of the things that you don't need government to tell you what to do. So the 4 nations can learn from one another as to what works and what isn't working. And also we have a white paper that we will have a pledge that everyone sign up to, and it will go publicly. This is where you, the public, can get involved and support these young people. We all have that moral and ethical obligation to do what we can, and that will make fundamental change where those young people are concerned. For instance, upping the age from 18 to 25-year-olds leaving the care system.
It's an extraordinary cut-off, isn't it? It's just, okay, you're on your own now.
Absolutely, and we know that 33% of them end up homeless within the first 2 years, which is a virtual impossibility without a roof over your head to sustain a living in order to keep that independence. So therefore, obviously, what we're trying to do is up that age from 18 to 25-year-olds. Also, protected characteristic, which is really important. You know, we want to be able to ensure that these young people can get work and support, you know, them in their work so they can be sustainable.
So if someone's listening to this now and they can't get themselves down to the Guildhall over the next couple of days, and they think, do you know what, I should be trying to hire someone who's coming, or I should. How do they find out more about what you're doing? How do they
go on FatimaUKcampaign.com, learn more about it in my bio, and you can also still get tickets if you want to come along and support them, these young people, or actually listen to the Fatima's UK campaign anthem song.
She's doing her own intros now. Shall we have it? So this is I mean, it's quite a lineup. Johnny Depp, Ringo Starr, Zach Starkey, Ringo's son, Pete Townsend, Sean Ryder, Samantha Morton and others all contributed to the single, with all proceeds going to the charity. Whose idea was this?
Oh, well, obviously it was my idea, and the idea really behind that is to bring, you know, solidarity, you know, the humanity and kindness, is to educate people to understand what happens when a young child doesn't have the love and security of a home, and how important it is that we work together to build happier, healthier, safer tomorrows, a nicer, kinder society, and a stronger community, which is a must, because children are our future. And as I say, we all have that moral and ethical responsibility to do what we can. So ask yourself, what more can I do?
You were in the jungle with Sean Ryder, I've just remembered.
Sean Ryder was good friends. Yeah, we were in I'm a Celeb, the South African Legends.
That's it. How did the others get on board? You just ring them up?
Of course. I mean, Ringo Starr, who's Zach Starkey's son, who plays the drums on the anthem song. He plays for the Who. He played for Oasis. He also has connections as well, and we brought in Johnny Depp. Yeah, Ringo Starr plays on it. Pete Townsend the bass.
We should have a listen. Shouldn't we? Are you
Please.
on it? What do you do?
Yeah,
You're playing the kazoo. You're playing the tambourine in the background, are you?
I'm singing along, but I also spliced in there somewhere.
I must have missed the call, Fatima. I must have not answered my phone that day.
No, you're one of our ambassadors. You're there always.
I could have done a job for you. I could have come along. I could have played the spoons or something like that. This is a little taste of Take My Hand, which is, as you've heard, designed to raise money for Fatima's UK campaign. Has the band got a name? Has the supergroup got an actual name?
No, it's just a supergroup.
It's just the Fatima's UK supergroup.
This is really nothing.
You can tell that they know what they're doing, don't they? The voice you heard, of course, was Samantha Morton, who was made a ward of court, I think, at the age of 8. Spent a lot of time in Nottinghamshire care homes, so she really does know what she's talking
Absolutely.
about.
Both Sam and I were, adamant that we need to do more for our young people, and this is why Fatima's UK campaign's my ministry, to hold people to account and make sure that we bring fundamental change which will make a difference to these young people's lives.
And you can find out more at fatimascampaign.com. It's always good to see you.
Thank you, James. God bless you.
Hey. It's 12 noon.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 12. I think I put that in my folder for later in the week. I think it a bit of a different tack now on the conversation. But the idea of people being put off coming here, cancer experts being put off coming here by the rhetoric on immigration, a story that appears before the government even announces it's going to start publishing league tables of foreign criminals awaiting deportation. But, oh dear. It is a completely different conversation that we're going to have now. And how much attention do you pay to the ebb and flow of relevance? Or not even relevance, the ebb and flow of profile. So do you notice that something we used to talk about quite a lot we haven't talked about for a while? Do you ever notice that? I suppose it partly depends on how much attention you're paying to the programme, doesn't it? And I fully understand that you cannot all be paying full attention at all times. I'm just talking to my colleagues now. But from a listener's point of view as well, it's incredibly difficult to be giving me your undivided attention at all times. But some subjects, Brexit, obviously. Did anyone sort of notice when Brexit went off the boil? It's coming back again now. I think there just ceased to be any point in talking about it. There comes a point when banging your head against a brick wall is you have to accept that the brick wall isn't going anywhere. Even if you as the head banger were fully in the right, you had to wait to be proved right. And banging your head against the brick wall until the brick wall has been dismantled by the people who built it is a waste of everybody's time. Some of the subjects that we used to talk about a lot sort of tail off a bit latterly. And other ones come round with increasing regularity and frequency. I don't know why it is. Sometimes I'll see a story in the news and I'll think, we used to do some great phone-ins on that, and I'll turn the page and I won't do the phone-in again. Other days I'll turn the page. I don't think we've ever talked about that before. That looks like a good one. And then I realise it is. What did we do last week that felt like we should be doing it more often? There was something last week and I said, that was absolutely fascinating. I don't think we've ever done that before. And we hadn't. And we will again. But I had a minor obsession for a long time with vegetarianism and veganism. So much so, I think it gets a whole chapter in my book, How Not to Be Wrong. Does it get a whole chapter? I'm not sure, but it certainly gets a lot of attention. I was called, what was it called? I was called by a lovely caller to the programme who called me a corpse-munching psychopath, I think. Very lovingly, a corpse-munching psychopath. And I sat here this is why I'm wondering how much attention you've been paying, because I'm almost certainly going to get the numbers wrong here. I sat here about 5 years ago. Do you think? About 5 years ago? Maybe more. And I said to you, I fully expect I'll be a vegetarian 5 years from now. Or 10 years from now. I've definitely said that to you. And not only am I not a vegetarian, I think it was the dementia conversation, Drew. You're right. But it was the angle we took on it, because we talked about dementia before, but we took an angle on it, didn't we, that was new. It was to do with children, wasn't it? It was to do with... Anyway, it'll come to me shortly if it hasn't come to you already. Women taking men's surnames when marrying, suggests Dave. There was loads of good stuff on the show last week. It's a good job you can listen on catch-up using Global Player. But we used to talk a lot about vegetarianism and veganism, and I went on a proper journey. I went on a huge journey because I used to be very much in that very easy territory of taking the mickey out of vegetarians and vegans and doing all the usual jokes about how do you know if someone's a vegan? Because they bloody tell you. Why don't you have a meat option at a vegetarian wedding? Sorry, I set that up like it has a punchline. It doesn't. Why don't you have a meat option at a vegetarian wedding? I had a wedding. I had some vegetarian guests. I provided a vegetarian option. I went to their wedding. I am not a vegetarian. There wasn't any meat. It's thick, right? But provocative. It's effective. It's nice sort of barroom. You think it's quite low-level banter, and you take the mickey out of people who were passionate about it. You'd snigger at the people who really did believe that all life was, for want of a better word, sacred. And then I started to change. And I started to change for a couple of reasons. One was an acknowledgement that I'd like to say cheekiness, but you could say unpleasantness, was coming from a place of shame or guilt. That's why I reacted in the way that I did in the first hour to the caller talking about shame and guilt being a force for good, immediately made me think about this subject, which I was planning on talking to you with you about later, because I realised that the reason why, at least I thought, that the reason why I could be quite performatively rude about vegetarians and vegans was probably because deep down inside I knew they were right. So I remember when one of my children just decided that she wasn't going to eat lamb anymore. And the reason was that she couldn't, in all conscience, look at a lamb and then eat one. It just pushed a button inside her that has never been unpushed. And it can be quite irritating at Easter, but, there it is. Also, what right have I got to be irritated by that? But that sense of shame that we, I think, deal with when somebody has demonstrated greater strength of character than we're able to muster up ourselves. I think it cuts both ways. It's why we can be so horrible to very overweight people, because we know that we're overweight ourselves, and therefore we take out a bit of our self-loathing on the people who are even more overweight than us. And then it cuts in the opposite direction when people are doing things that we know are probably the right thing to do. We shouldn't be eating animals. Animals are our friends, man. And yet we are. And in order to feel better about the cognitive dissonance contained within that simple statement, I eat animals, but I know that I shouldn't, we attack the people who've developed or demonstrated the strength of character to do the right thing. That's what I used to think. And there were some thinkers that really informed my views, really informed my thinking. I genuinely found myself thinking that by this stage in my life, I would probably have become a vegetarian. Actually, it's probably going back 8 years, around the time I saw Simon Amstell's film Carnage, which I have talked to you about before. And Simon's film, big fan of Simon Amstell. His film posits a future where everyone is vegetarian. Eating meat is outlawed, but everybody wants it to be outlawed. It's like a moral outrage that has finally been recognised by the whole of society, and no one will even admit to having eaten meat in the good old days, the bad old days. So do you see what I mean? It's such a complete transformation of the population, as if that point I'm making about everybody knowing that we shouldn't be eating animals somehow broke through on an epic scale, and suddenly not only is nobody eating animals, it's set in 2067, so roughly 50 years ahead of when it came out, and it looks back at what we do now. People sitting there speaking straight to camera about their utter shock and horror at the idea that anybody could ever have killed and eaten animals. It works brilliantly. They're called carnists, the cult of carnism. There's like psychologists on screen helping people deal with the trauma caused by the knowledge that they have not just eaten animals, killed and eaten animals, but eaten cheese, for example. You have to see the film. I'm not doing it justice. It's brilliant. But it turns out it didn't affect me as much as I thought it had, because I'm not a vegetarian, and I thought that I would be. And then I turned my attention to a story that occurred over the weekend, and it's a story that I think you only know about because there is footage of a shopper grabbing a vegan activist's megaphone and smashing it on the ground while the activists were staging a protest in a supermarket. The campaigners are holding up screens showing animal slaughter and using their megaphones to get their point across to the shoppers. And one man wades straight in there, grabs the loudhailer from a woman named Ella Wild and smashes it on the ground before walking away. And you can hear someone else on the footage saying, "Good man, glad someone done it." Another said, "I felt sorry for her for a millisecond, and then I seen she was a vegan protester, no sympathy." And a third said, "So they are allowed to cause a disruption about something that affects his livelihood, but he isn't allowed to retaliate," suggesting perhaps that the angry shopper was a butcher. And it's always intrigued me, the level, because I used to suffer from it. I never would have done what he did. But I would have felt my heckles. Is it heckles or hackles? Heckles. I felt my heckles rising whenever I was confronted with somebody like that. It's not live and let live, is it? Live and let live is pretty easy to understand. It's okay, well, I have chosen to live this way, but I fully understand that you don't want to. It crosses over into this idea that I have appointed myself to a role in which I'm going to tell you what you should and should not do. And I still don't understand why that excites such negativity in other people. I don't believe that this reaction and the comments of the bystanders would have been the same for any protest about anything. You know, it prompts something visceral, and I still don't fully understand why. I've examined my own reactions to this, and I no longer have that visceral response, but I haven't travelled far enough to have become vegetarian myself. I wouldn't feel my heckles rise when I saw these protesters in this supermarket. I could have been irritated by the loud hailer, but that would be a question of volume, not content. You'll probably find this very hard to believe, but if you turned up your listening device now to its highest possible setting, it's conceivable you could even find me irritating. I know, if it was really, really loud. So you could be irritated by the volume even as you love the content. So I can imagine the circumstances in which it would tick me off. But I've never understood well, here it is, contained within one comment. Felt sorry for her for a millisecond. Then I seen she was a vegan protester. Why, and I suppose we can do this from any angle you want. Why do vegans in general and vegan protesters, vegan activists in particular, wind everybody up so much? Because what is the point of being a vegan unless you are an activist? What is the point of deciding that we shouldn't be killing and eating animals unless you want everybody else to stop killing and eating animals? It's a little bit like the converse of the climate change argument, isn't it? You always hear idiots saying things like, oh, well, we don't create much pollution. Why are we getting involved in it? Oh, China is the problem. If it is the right thing to do, you do it, regardless of what everybody else is doing, but you work bloody hard to make sure that everybody else does the right thing as well. This isn't complicated. This isn't difficult. I am a vegan because I don't believe that animals should be killed and eaten. I'm not going to be quiet about the fact that you're still killing and eating animals. So in many ways, more than almost anything else, just stop oil, I suppose, would be another. It's not good enough to make changes to your own lifestyle. You have to campaign. What's the verb for activist? Is there a verb for it? It's not activate. What's the verb for activist? Do activism? It's not good enough just to do it yourself. You have to do it for the whole of society. Otherwise, your mission can never be accomplished. So more than almost any other pressure group, the vegan, by definition, has to be an activist. They have to be working tirelessly to stop other people doing the things that they find, I think with some good reason, to be abominable. So 12:16 is the time. As a vegan, why do you think your choices wind up other people so much? You must have given it more thought than I have. Why do you think your choices wind up other people so much? 0345 6060 973. I mean, challenge my analysis that the relationship is about shame or guilt, or that you can't really be a vegan without being an activist. You can't be a live and let live vegan because your role, your purpose in being a vegan is to help halt the slaughter of animals, the exploitation of animals. You can't do that by giving up honey. You have to want everybody else to give up honey and eggs and meat and the rest of it. So why does that wind everybody else up so much? Advocate is a good word. I think that's probably it. It's definitely not activise, Anthony, but thank you for playing. Agitate, advocate. You can't be a vegan without advocating for veganism, I don't think. And that's great. And listen, if you're going to if you're going to pull the leg of lamb from my cold, dead hand, then you're impinging upon my liberty in a way that's not acceptable. But if you are going to picket a supermarket where I'm going to buy my leg of lamb and remind me of what the production of that leg of lamb involves, I don't know that I'm allowed to object, because you are, well, I don't know. You are doing what you have to do to achieve what you want. And what you want is a world in which we don't eat animals. So why does everyone else get so upset about it? So there's two obvious callers this hour. The vegan who has given some thought to why everybody else gets so upset about it, and the people getting so upset about it. I suppose if you're a butcher, it's an assault upon your livelihood. It's like somebody standing outside LBC saying, turn off James O'Brien, turn off James O'Brien, turn off James O'Brien, endlessly into the ether. Well, it wouldn't make much difference where you did that, actually, would it? Because it's not as if you listened to me by congregating outside in the street. But believe, making an assault upon my livelihood, I get the grounds for irritation. But simply saying, oh, here's how the lamb you're having for lunch today is produced. Here's what happens to the little lambs that you're about to eat. Well, why? Why does it wind people up so much? Why does it wind you up so much? Think about it. I've tried to think about it. I've talked about guilt and shame and the knowledge that they're right. Maybe you've got a completely different analysis. If you do, I want to hear it. 0345 6060 973. It's 12:19.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 12. I mean, in a way, it was a rhetorical question when I mentioned all the things that we used to talk about and don't talk about anymore, and all the things we've never talked about that we started talking about more. But Anna took things literally. She said, what's going on with the PPE scandal, James? Well, I hopefully have a guest for you tomorrow, or certainly later this week, who has been tirelessly chronicling the findings at that inquiry. And I, like you, am a little bit puzzled as to why his work is not getting more coverage, but it will get more coverage here. Not for now, though, because for now we are looking at a protest that saw a protester being borderline assaulted. I mean, he didn't grab her, but he grabbed her loudhailer, hurled it to the floor and stomped off. And it's a timely moment to reflect upon why vegans incite such anger and unpleasantness when what they're trying to do is look after animals. It's a funny one, isn't it? Alison is in Bury St Edmunds. Alison, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Thanks for taking my call. And as I said to your researcher, your resident vegan cafe owner.
Oh, lovely.
I've spoken to you before a couple of times, I think, on the vegan subject. It's a funny one, isn't it?
You own a vegan cafe, just for clarity, for anyone who doesn't remember.
Yeah.
Not just any old cafe, Alison, but a vegan cafe.
Exactly. I honestly can't give you the answer to the question because I'm obviously on the other side. I'm vegan myself. Never thought I'd go vegan. Went vegan in 2017 after watching. I was kind of halfway there because my middle daughter had already gone vegan. I've gone dairy free myself. Watched What the Health and thought I'd get it now. Yes. There wasn't a lot of stuff around at that time, so I decided to start my business. And the rest, as they say, regard my business as history. As for why people get angry with us,
do that. I mean, I mean, because this is an extreme example, and it's only because there's footage of it that it's made the news. But do you recognise that characterisation of responses?
Not here.
Well, not in an actual vegan cafe. You wouldn't walk in and start. Well, I suppose somebody might, but generally speaking,
we get it the other way round.
Right.
We get the other way round. We get people coming in not realising we are a vegan cafe. Oh no, I can't have oat milk. Oh no, and they walk out. Even when I've offered to say, look, I'll give it you for free if you don't like it.
Really?
Come back.
Don't say that. Everyone will be round. Keith will be round. Keith will be round. On the scrounge in a minute.
And we've had the kids ring up, on the phone. Do you sell sausages? Are you, we've had it all.
Well, mischief makers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, there you go. That fits my analysis, doesn't it? Little scroats.
But it kind of the first thing that popped into my head was kind of what's happening. I don't want to get too political, but what's happening with the government at the minute? It's almost like people are trying to tell people what to do. And they say, the government is taking away free speech, they're this, and it's like, you can't tell us what to do. You can't tell me what to eat. And I get that because you have to meet people where they are, So
you don't agree with that next bit of my analysis, which is to be a proper vegan, you have to be an activist.
Well, somebody once said, because I when I first started my business, I started on the local market, and I said, I don't have time to go out and do the activism stuff. I have plenty of friends who do, and I take my hat off to them. I don't have the time.
Okay.
And someone said that this is my type of activism. The cafe
good.
Yeah,
different types. But you are spreading the word. You are on a mission.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's activism.
Exactly, and 60-70% of our customers aren't vegan.
That's interesting.
We're part. we're part of the local community. We have a little shop, and it's I do cakes for people. I'm doing a wedding this weekend, which is going to be a total vegan wedding. I've got wedding cakes next weekend, and
business is going well then.
Yeah, I mean, there are some days where I think, what the heck? Where are the customers? We're very quiet today after the bank holiday, but overall it works, because it just depends how the business is, how you are, how you integrate with the community. And, our menu's based just around food, and we do have a bit of a
and you're not
and with some of our customers, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I like this. It's a different way of spreading the word and trying to change the habits of an entire population, and it's less in your face, less aggressive, and quite pleasant. But while I have you, Alison,
yes,
when you decided to open an eatery, Alison,
yeah,
did you spend a lot of time coming up with a name for it?
Yes.
What did you call your eatery, Alison, in the end?
It's called Alison's Eatery.
Oh no! Oh God, yeah. I mean, that must have been. Did you pay a big branding consultant?
No. The funny thing was, I was going to call, because everyone calls me Ali or Al, or and I was going to call it Ali's Eatery, and someone said, "Oh, but you sound like a kebab shop."
or it sounds Italian if you put a Z in the middle of it. That could be a kebab shop. Ali's Eatery. I'm going to Ali's Eatery for some rigatoni. It's a lovely trattoria in Bury St Edmunds. No, Alison's Eatery. It sounds lovely, and you've got some wonderful reviews on there. I did some.
Are you watching it?
How else do you think I knew the name? You never told me the name of it before. I just did some detective work live on the radio. That's journalism, that is, Alison.
And I can guarantee after this conversation, I will get, as I did last time, I had some lovely comments of local vegans and local people, and I had probably 3 or 4 people, maybe 10 people that week come in because they said on the radio.
Oh, there we go.
So,
there, get yourself down there. Thank you, Alison, of Alison's Eatery fame. It is 27 after 12, and Becky's in Islington. Becky, what do you reckon?
Hey, James.
Hello, Becky.
So I'm a vegan, but not a proper one, probably.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm not an activist.
Okay.
So I turned vegan a few years ago, mainly because my girlfriend was vegan, and actually it was the Carnage film, the Simon Amstell, that was the trigger for her deciding to be vegan. It was so impactful on her. Yeah. But to be honest with you, I just kind of evolved into becoming vegan because it's easier when there's 2 of you and you're doing most of the cooking. And, it's easier to eat vegan, and actually it's a more of a health choice than a kind of a political or ethical stance that I'm taking.
So you don't invite or excite anger or disapproval from other people because you're not telling them that what they're doing is wrong?
So not anger or disapproval, but still people take the mickey, and I think in response to your question around why do we think that is, why I think vegans are probably an easy target.
Yes.
Vegans, although you might make some assumptions about what a stereotypical vegan looks like or sounds like, it's kind of easier to take the mickey out of vegans because because it's not as dangerous, right? So if you're in the pub taking the mickey out of a very specific demographic of people,
yes.
If you were picking race or you were picking sexuality or gender identity, that's a riskier move, right?
They're working on it. It's not as risky as it used to be.
It's not as good as I'd like it to be, but I guess because vegans aren't quite as a homogenous group.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's a little bit. It's a safer way to go, but I also think it links to your point, which is. People like to eat meat. I used to really enjoy eating meat. There's no doubt about the fact that meat tastes nice. I miss eating meat. I enjoyed meat. Grew up probably eating more meat than I should have done. And I think people don't enjoy the idea that you're taking a moral stance and looking down on them for their choice.
Because they know that they're wrong. Because if you're looking down on me for my choice, well, if I think you're a wombat, actually, I've promised to stop being mean to wombats. If I think you're a wally, and I think you're looking down on me, I don't care, do I? I only care if I think you're looking down on me, if I think you might have a point, surely, or not?
Well, I think some people have a slightly more precious ego than you, maybe.
God forbid. Perish the thought. Perish the thought.
I don't think it's necessarily a really conscious thing. No. I think it's more of an innate thing, which is if you feel you are being judged by somebody, whether you think they're a wally or not, you will have disdain for that person.
How dare you judge me? How dare you judge
me?
Who are you to judge me? And there it is. And there is
some vegans that are totally judgmental.
But there is, I know, but these ones in this shop at the weekend obviously were, because in a way they're telling you to change your plans for your Easter. They're telling you there's something fundamentally wrong with your Easter lunch. Becky, beautifully put. Thank you. 12:30 is the time. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I find this really fascinating. What are the things? What are the things that you are constantly being told you should do or you should be, that you resent being told you should do or you should be? I get a lot of messages insisting that I start hating immigrants or Muslims or anybody who doesn't look like me, and they're odd messages, you know. Why can't you see that this country is going down the toilet because of... And you're sort of like, well, hang on a minute, you're hate-filled and ignorant. I'd have thought that was a much bigger contributor to the decline of a nation. I think Farage has started putting "Britain is broken" on his slogans. So it makes you wonder whether he's actually read How They Broke Britain. Yeah, you'd have to hope so, because he gets a whole flipping chapter. Fact after fact after fact after fact about how 10 and in the paperback edition 11 prominent figures have done terrible things to this country, sometimes deliberately, sometimes by accident. I'm just trying to think what the equivalent would be. If I walked into Morrison's, as I did yesterday, and there was someone with a loud hailer, "Don't buy lamb." Have we got the footage, actually? Should we play the footage? Does it work as audio? I can't remember. It doesn't. No, forget it. Don't worry. Go look at it on the LBC website. There you go. They'll all buy me a drink afterwards, pushing a bit of traffic in their direction. And someone is there going, "Don't eat lamb," and someone else is holding up a picture of a lamb. I'm told that in the United States of America, you're not allowed to film in slaughterhouses, which should give us all pause, right? Which should give us all... Why not? So, because the people who create the product don't want you to know what happens. To which I think the normal human response would be, why not? What are you worried about? Nothing to hide. You've got nothing to fear. Turns out they've got a lot to hide. But you don't want to be told. Ignorance is bliss. So why is it vegans that wind people up so much? Tasha is in Cambridge. Tasha, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James. It was really good to speak to you.
Likewise.
Really lovely to hear you talk about how your thoughts and beliefs about veganism have changed. And I think you sound very much like I did about 6 years ago, when I was there with all the arguments. I completely was on side with veganism, but I just hadn't aligned my actions with my beliefs.
Well, sadly, I was there 6 years ago as well, Tasha, but here I still am, I'm afraid.
It takes some people a bit more time than others, but I'm sure you'll get there eventually, James.
Maybe.
So what I wanted to say basically is that I think the reason that a lot of people get angry with vegans when they're confronted with the truth is that we're brought up in a society, in an environment that is very much against what are kind of the vegan values. I mean, I think a lot of people fundamentally do have vegan values, like people do care about animals generally. They want them to be treated well. If you question that, you just need to look at any, comment thread where a dog or a cat has been harmed in some ways. You see lots of people very, very angry about that. But unfortunately, we're brought up in a society which teaches us to kind of view different animals differently. And we're taught that we call them sort of the 3 or sometimes the 4 N's. So we're taught that it's normal to harm animals, or necessary to harm or eat animals, and that it's natural. And the 4th one is actually nice, because, animals taste nice, and I think fundamentally that's a really important thing for a lot of
something
people.
So delicious can't be wrong, in other words.
Exactly,
that kind of logic.
Unfortunately, and a lot of the time when people are confronted with this information and with, the harsh reality of, the impact of their choices on animals, it's natural for them to feel kind of either angry or, sad or, some sort of bad feeling. And I think a lot of the time they'll take that out on the messenger, which is, the vegan that's giving that information, rather than the industries that are the people that are actually, responsible for this harm.
Yeah. No, so, I remember a therapist telling me that when you point a finger at someone, there are 3 fingers pointing back at you. So it's often got a lot to do with what's going on inside you that you articulate as apparent anger towards the person over there that you're angry with. Those are normal, necessary, natural, and nice. So you subscribe, I think, to the school of thought that you can't really be a vegan without being an activist, because what you want is the end of the practice.
Absolutely. I like to think of veganism as it's a non-action. The day you become vegan is the day you stop causing harm to others. But the day that you become a vegan activist, that's when you're actually starting to put something positive back into the world and you're actually, affecting positive change for animals.
Yes. And the reaction of the bloke, I don't know if you've seen the footage, he grabs a loudhailer out of this woman's hand and smashes it on the floor. And it's quite, she doesn't let go of it easily. So it could have escalated. It's an unpleasant moment, but not, I suspect, to you, a surprising one.
Absolutely not. And it's we have this reaction quite a lot as vegans, and we kind of learn to develop quite a thick skin. But
it's such a strange thing for someone else to get angry about.
Exactly, and I think the thing, as I mentioned before, that really shows it into sharp relief. If you had that same video, but these were people campaigning against, the Yulin Dog Meat Festival in China.
You've beaten me to it. You've literally just taken my next question out of my mouth.
You're already there, James. You're a vegan. You just don't know it yet.
Well, I mean, unless you do the argument that I'm not saying this is me, but somebody who wanted to counter your point would say, well, I am as untroubled by the meat that is eaten in other parts of the world as I am here, because to be troubled by the dog festival you've referred to would be hypocritical if I'm happy to watch a kind of lamb apocalypse every Easter.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that would be at least more morally consistent. I would probably say it's still not, morally virtuous in any way. But yeah, and I think what the reality is that most people, definitely in the UK, would not have that opinion. We love our dogs, we love our pets so much. We take them in our homes, we treat them as members of our family, and yet there is no morally relevant difference between those animals that we love struggle. And the ones that we put into, gas chambers or slaughterhouses.
Yeah, but I would be, even if I believed it, I'd be frightened to say I've got no problem with the dog festivals, because it would be like in this society at this time, it would be like painting a target on your back. And yet, of course, all that they are doing is treating dogs in the way that we treat cows and sheep. Is this? I must have stumbled across this before with callers, but I can't remember. Is this like the holy grail of hypocrisy for vegans?
What is it?
The attitude that so-called animal lovers take to some animals being eaten when compared to the attitude to all animals or other animals being eaten.
It is one line of kind of argument. It's you may have even heard the term speciesism and speciesist, and it's like kind of drawing those parallels between other forms of discrimination throughout the ages.
The more you talk, I think you've got almost all the cards in your hand. I really do. And the more we talk about it, and the more clear it becomes to me, or the harder it becomes for me to argue against the idea that the negativity comes from guilt, shame, self-knowledge, and of course that's slightly childish, but we all have it. Resentment at being told what to do, especially if the person telling you what to do, deep down that they're right to tell you. It's crazy, right? I almost wish I could put on my old head and approach this from the angle I used to approach it, from the traditional way for TV and radio hosts to approach the subject, is to be really angry about vegans without really knowing why. I wonder what tools would I reach for this morning? Why are you telling me what to do? Well, I actually can't get inside that mindset, even though I used to have it. And yet, as Tasha points out, I haven't got anywhere near, I don't think, the end of this particular journey. And yet I recognise an air of its inevitability. We were going to broaden it out to whether or not this is reflected across society, whether or not it feels as if the issue has diminished in relevance, diminished in importance recently. I don't think that all of the vegan products in supermarkets helped, actually, because quite often they weren't very good for you. They were ultra-processed food. So that seemed to, and then they were everywhere for a while, and then they weren't. I don't know, but we don't need to broaden it out into anything else, because everybody is sufficiently fascinated with the first element of the question. Dylan is in Oxford. Dylan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First caller. A little bit nervous.
It's only me.
I'm fine.
It's only me, Dylan.
Your last caller was absolutely brilliant, by the way.
She was great, wasn't she?
A lot of great points. Some of the things that I was going to touch on as well, but no, brilliant. Couldn't have put it better myself. For me, I've kind of been vegan I have been vegan for about 8 years now, and the big thing I find, when I first became vegan, I kind of had that enlightened moment, and I thought, yes, I want to tell the world, this is brilliant. You should do this, you should do that. And then I came crashing down to earth and realised, crikey, I'm kind of standing on a soapbox and I'm telling everyone what to do. Yes. And I thought, this isn't a good way to go about it. And no matter what I think, I can't change the world that way. So I calmed down. And anyone who was interested in talking to me about what I do, why I do it, I could have a great conversation with them. Fast forward to where I am now, when I'm with family or colleagues, I still get the odd occasion where people will roll their eyes if I'm talking about it.
Yes.
And you always feel like you're kind of being judged in a kind of jokey way or a negative way.
Yes.
And it's unfair because you feel, well, look, I wouldn't wave a bottle of beer in front of you if you were a recovering alcoholic, for instance.
No, but a recovering alcoholic wouldn't really be campaigning to abolish alcohol.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I
so
get
it doesn't
you.
Quite. Anyway, I'm addicted to analogies. I probably need to go to analogies. Analogies Anonymous, but so I always pick up other people's. But
absolutely.
So So do you think that the people in the story that we started off discussing this morning, the Daily Mail, LBC website goes for the headline: "Moment angry shopper smashes megaphone of vegan activists berating customers for buying Easter lamb." Do you disapprove of what they were doing? The protesters.
I don't disapprove because I feel I am still strongly minded that I feel it's a way that we do need to go.
But you wouldn't be there yourself with your megaphone.
I personally, no, I wouldn't do that. But I do feel a sense of moral obligation, and I do still, where possible, I do want to spread the word, if you like.
Yeah, because as Sam points out, if you start from the first principle of do no harm, then you don't need to cause suffering to animals. They don't need to suffer for us to live a healthy and satisfied life. And I do think that many people, perhaps the people who get most weirdly angry, are the ones who hate the fact that they know they're wrong. But leaves the question hanging of why I haven't moved further from when I acknowledged all of this last time we talked about it. Is it a form of moral laziness? I eat a lot less meat than I used to, but that's just habit and health. I genuinely don't know. Just a nod back to the last hour. I've got at least two texts today from Kidderminster, which is very uplifting. Why would Kidderminster be in the news at the moment? I can't think. First up, Martin, nodding on the last conversation about league tables for criminals awaiting deportation. He goes, "What about people who have more than one nationality, James? Will they be counted more than once?" Up the Harriers. And Sam, who's also in Kidderminster, talking about a well-known public figure who appeared about to burst a blood vessel over Greg's introducing a vegan sausage roll. There's something primal about the way some people are offended by veganism, as if they're having their own freedom of choice taken away. And yet, of course, the whole tofu-eating wokerati narrative is about mocking other people for exercising their freedom of choice. Great points. Must be something in the water in Kidderminster.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Well, 48 is the time. Did I ever tell you about the feature film I'm in? I can't remember. Did I ever mention about the massive, successful feature film? I exaggerate slightly. I refer to a beautiful film called The Rubber Keyed Wonder, the story of the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which was made by a husband and wife team, Anthony and Nicola Caulfield, who join me now. So you can probably tell, Nicola, that I have quite a lot of freedom, editorial freedom on the show. Because it is, although it appeals enormously to me, some people listening are not going to have the first idea what we're actually talking about. But we can say with some confidence that the ZX Spectrum has an iconic state in the minds of many. Do we know why?
Well, I think certainly for me, because I obviously was a massive Spectrum fan, it's the nostalgia element. It was that day when I went out with my mum and dad and my brother, and we went off and we bought the Spectrum. It was such a big event. Yeah. I actually brought it with me. This is my Spectrum.
I'm going weird again. This is not normal. Yeah. Proust had Madeleines. I have a ZX Spectrum.
Yeah. And I think it was going and buying it and then bringing it home, plugging it into the TV, and then being able to put something on that TV. I was absolutely blown away by it. I mean, I still get all warm and fuzzy when I think about them.
That is the Spectrum from the film that James holds.
Is that the one I hold in the film?
Yeah.
You should have warned me about the size of that screen at the IMAX. My moobs have never looked bigger. It's quite an arresting moment, I have to say. Anthony, this isn't the first film that you've made, so where did the idea come from that you could turn this shared passion for an old hobby, if you like, for old, long superseded technology. But you obviously knew there were seams that you would be able to tap into as filmmakers.
Yeah, it sort of started around 2012 when Nicola and I were coming up. We'd been doing a lot of documentaries on comedy and music and other things, and we were looking at new subjects. And we made a list, and the first one was our experiences of the British video games industry. We both grew up in the 1980s, though we only actually met in 1990. But the point was we were consumers. We played video games, computer games. I actually had a Commodore 64 and Nicola had a Spectrum, which should probably get me sacked from the radio station immediately. But we thought this was an interesting story. There wasn't really people doing films about the games industry itself, so we made a film called From Bedrooms to Billions, and we crowdfunded it. And that kind of started the whole thing. That was a bit of a sort of a cult hit because it tells the story of the British games industry. But in it, we realised when we were making that film how significant the Spectrum was and how much of an impact it had certainly on the UK. And we knew we needed to revisit it at some point in the future.
And it does justice to Sir Clive Sinclair's memory, the film, doesn't it? Some of which I didn't know. Did you learn a lot while you were making it?
We didn't know half the things that we found out. We didn't realise the whole pocket calculator part of the story. We really didn't know where he started and that he was going and buying little parts and then selling them on to other computer and radio enthusiasts and things like that. And a journalist, we didn't know any of that. All my experience was just the Spectrum. So the more people that we spoke to, we just found out so much more about him, so much more than people talk about the C5 and everything, which even then was ahead of his time. But there's much more to the man.
There were a few C5 enthusiasts at the premiere, weren't there?
Yes,
some people won't let it go.
No. Jason Bradbury is very proud of the fact he's still got one that runs and drives around in it.
He did a great job of hosting events on the night. And what struck me was what's the word I want? The status of some of the big software, some of the big games makers. We felt, those of us in the room, as if we were in the room with rock stars, I think.
There was that. I mean, I've had this, talking of rock, is sort of an analogy perhaps that we've sort of come up. In a way, this was our rock and roll.
Yeah.
Because the baby boomer generation experienced rock and roll from the late 50s and through the 60s, whereas for those born in the late 60s or 70s, we experienced the microchip revolution through the 1980s, and living through it, there was an obsessive need to know more. There was no real commercial feeling. It was, I've got to have that computer because I want to do something. It was kind of and there was that revolution through the 1980s, and the Spectrum was coming out in April 1982, which is actually pretty much 43 years ago today, by the way, just out of interest, the release date.
Is it? Oh, yeah, of course it is, yes.
I think something that really came from a lot of the interviews that we did was that people would say, I didn't know that I couldn't do that on the Spectrum. So they would just try anything.
That's the bit I didn't know of the story, because I gave up on programming very, very early, and just like most people did. But the ones who stayed with it were doing things that Clive Sinclair didn't know that they would be able to do. And something I found interesting was his lack of interest in the game side of things, which, was commercially not the cleverest approach he could have taken.
No.
How often we find that with geniuses, where he'd succeeded in that invention, he was bored and wanted to move on to something else. Yeah. And the whole commercial element of it, of, rinse it as much as possible, but sell add-ons, didn't come naturally to him. And that he was an inventor first.
And not a wannabe wealthy man, as it were. And the games that people are already messaging me about, way of the exploding fist. I've got one complaint that we're all being a bit ageist because he had a ZX80. But that gets a bit of coverage in the film.
It does indeed,
It's the genesis of the Spectrum.
And 81.
Jet Set Willy, Chucky Egg, Ant-Attack Saboteur. I was really surprised when I came to see you about how many genuine emotions it dredged up. And that's why I think your point about rock and roll is really interesting. Because not only, and I don't think this bit made the film, not only was it taking me back to my teenage bedroom, and a lot of people listening will know, and indeed are sharing exactly that sense, that feeling, but the journalism around games was fascinating as well. And again, I learned stuff about that. For me, that the Ludlow based magazines, Crash and Zap, I don't know that I would have gone into journalism if it hadn't been for the kind of work that they did. I could have been like my dad, who was a proper news journalist, but I wanted to do stuff that felt more, I don't know, more personal, more kind of opinion-led, and they showed the way.
Yeah. That's why we put that section in the film, because it came up over and over again. It was pre-internet, so you relied on those magazines, and the Ludlow magazines in particular, Crash and Zat. In fact, we'll come back to Crash in a minute because we've got a little surprise for you. But with Crash, the reviewers were effectively schoolboys, or school children, and that they shared that passion for whether they liked a game or hated a game, and they had the power to make or break a game back then. It was a really important factor.
I think it was nice to feature Roger and Ollie as well, because they've since passed away.
Yes, I know.
So it was really nice to have that segment in the film talking about them.
It was very moving.
Yeah.
On the side of the commercial, how well is it done? Because we're about to tell people how they can watch the film if they haven't already. But you crowdfunded this one as well. A great sense of camaraderie and passion in the room that night.
Yeah.
Well, the end credits are almost the length of Tron, aren't they? Because there's a lot of people contributed towards that to get that film made, and we couldn't have done it without those backers. It's as simple as that. The film is now out on a wide release as of yesterday, so it's now available digitally on Apple and Amazon, and physically on Amazon. On our website, we've got a special version on graciousfilms.com where we've got the reversible cover, the old John Harris artwork from the manual. So really, it's now about letting the world know that there's a film about the spectrum out there.
And you don't have to, because I wasn't a geek. Honest, I was not. I was definitely not a geek. I was quite a cool kid.
Yeah.
But when I was at home and when the game was on, especially if Mum and Dad were out and I could plug it into the colour TV downstairs instead of the little black and white one up in my room, I could plug it into the colour TV. I was gone for hours.
Yeah. You were good at adventure games, though.
I loved adventure games. To type in, get Kate, where Kate fly, all that kind of stuff. Dig here. I could still play those. I still do play them a little bit. But of course, the technology's moved on. You play something like Indiana Jones now on the Xbox or the PlayStation, and they're adventure games, albeit that you're animated and you're playing a film. We're nearly done. What's the surprise?
Right. Well, we have this for you. It's we only made 500 of these. And we will do a Blue Peter moment. It's a movie collector's box signed by Crispin Sinclair, Clive Sinclair's son.
Yes.
And inside it, as we prepared one earlier, is a little pop-up Clive holding the Spectrum on the release date, 43 years ago today.
That is so exciting.
And some metal posters of his first journalism job at Wireless, what's it called again? Sorry. Practical Wireless magazine.
Practical Wireless.
And that version of Crash is a very, very special one-off version made to time with the film.
And we're in it.
So we have to thank Chris Wilkins at Retrofusion Books for helping us out with that. But it's got all the games featured in the film.
I forgot I'd written this. My Spectrum memories.
Yeah.
I'm going to cry. And there it is. God, that picture of Eureka there.
Yeah.
25 grand you got if you were the first person in there. Someone won it, didn't they?
They did indeed.
It wasn't me. I spent an entire summer holidays convinced.
Trying to get it.
I shouldn't tell you this. I can't remember if I told you at the time. So Domark, the software house that made Eureka, they had like 4 different phone numbers for all the different departments. And I knew that if you solved it and you solved everything, that they would give you a phone number. There'd be a phone number that you rang to announce that you'd solved the I started ringing all the different variations on Domark's phone numbers just in the hope that I'd accidentally stumble across the right one. And then they'd say on the other end, what have you done to... And I didn't have anything. I don't know.
You needed a code at the end.
Yes,
that's
right.
Sir Ian Livingston wrote that game.
Who?
Ian Livingston,
yes,
Fighting Fantasy created that game.
Yeah, I know, exactly. And you can tell. It's a thing of beauty. And so is the Rubber Keyed Wonder, available now on Amazon and Prime, Amazon Physical and Prime Video, Apple, Google TV, YouTube Store, the BFI player. But I would recommend that you go to your website,
graciousfilms.com. There's some of those boxes on there as well.
And you can really immerse yourself in the beauty of it all. What are you doing next, guys? Do you know?
We're thinking
top secret.
About
don't tell me.
Yeah.
No, it's all right. It's okay.
We're thinking at the moment. We've a couple of ideas, haven't we?
Nicola and Anthony Caulfield, directors of the Rubber Keyed Wonder. Thank you both so much. Not just for coming in today and the remarkable present, but also for your beautiful film. Yeah. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of my show in 60 minutes every day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.